just have to, there's a bit of a lag.
Yep.
Yes. So as this one, that's what I thought. I wasn't. Karen and I got the camera, so as soon as we got together, I agreed to my son with grandkids because my daughter-in-law, which saved me in job court.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, Council, and to welcome to the residents both here and on Zoom, and to members of SLT that are present. I see that we have quorum, so I call this planning meeting in session. Public meeting under the Planning Act for this Wednesday, February 14th, also known as Valentine's Day, at 5:30 p.m. As usual, at the beginning of these meetings, we have the land recognition statement read, and tonight, Councillor Eckert will do this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now turn to the clerk for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask Jody to please share the presentation. Public meeting under the Planning Act, February 14th at 5:30 p.m. The Town of Pelham is holding hybrid public meetings. This means this involves a mixture of in-person and remote attendance and participation. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding the applications. Public meetings under the Planning Act are formal meetings requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you've pre-registered to speak virtually or will be participating in person, you'll be provided the opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Inappropriate comments will not be tolerated, and if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible. Contact information will follow on the presentation. We also have sign-in sheets at the front that you may leave your contact information. Additional contact information can be found on the Town of Pelham's website. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to the adoption of the agenda. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that the agenda be amended to include item 6.2.1. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Not seeing any. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Motion carries. To the clerk.
Thank you.
So now we'll do the adoption of the agenda as amended.
That's correct.
Okay. On the adoption of the agenda as amended, any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And none opposed. Motion carries. To you, Madam Clerk. Oh, no, I got this one. Next one is now at the adoption of agenda, and after viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? And please note, Madam Clerk, that there is none to be declared.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to our first item on the agenda, item number 5, and I will now read the notice requirements into the record. Town of Pelham applications for revision to approved draft plan of subdivision for Park Place West and zoning bylaw amendment, property east of Station Street and north of Summersides, file numbers 26T1901-2022 and AM 11-2023. Revision to draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment to permit the use of the property for 27 lots for single detached dwellings, 7 blocks for 14 semi-detached dwellings, and 6 blocks for 24 street townhouse dwellings for a total unit count of 65. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 and 51 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed applications. This meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on January 19th, 2024. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed revision to the approved draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendments. In addition to providing information, we'll also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will also be displayed on the last slide of the staff presentation. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decisions has been made on the proposed applications, and therefore any comments received will be considered by council. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. First presentation.
Yes, we do have the Director of Planning with us this afternoon to present this file.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Weens, Director of Planning for the Town of Pelham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the first public meeting that we have this evening. There are two tonight, and I will be doing the first public meeting. Unfortunately, Shannon was supposed to be here this evening and left earlier today, not feeling well, so you're stuck with me. This is a public meeting for Park Place West, secondary plan. That's the next one, sorry, not this one. So Park Place West draft plan of subdivision. So the property is located east of Station Street and north of Summerside's Boulevard. This is a revision to an existing approved draft plan of subdivision and further amendment to the zoning bylaw. The reason for the amendment to the draft plan is that there's been a change. The developer has acquired additional lands and he's added it to this plan of subdivision. And those additional lands are the rear of 1433 and 1435 Station Street. So this is an image of the original draft approved plan of subdivision. This was draft plan approved in August of 2022. So this draft plan that was approved consisted of 12 singles, 16 semi-detached, and 18 townhouse units for a total of 46 units. At the same time that the property received draft plan approval, it also received zoning bylaw amendment approval for the lots as they were configured. This is the revised proposed draft plan of subdivision. So the land area encompassing the subdivision has been somewhat increased. And you can see on the plan before you that there was lands added at the north limits of the subdivision and a small sliver of land at the south limits, which were kind of remnant pieces from the Park Place South subdivision, and then a block of land that includes the watercourse block, and that will continue to remain in the open space zoned. So the revised plan of subdivision consists of 22 singles, 14 semis, and 24 townhouse units for a total of 65 units. So it's been configured. There's 15 more additional units, 2 fewer semi-detached units, and I think 6 more townhouse units are what's proposed in this revised plan of subdivision. And along with that, there will be a revised zoning bylaw amendment. This plan is provided for context, and you can see how this area being Park Place South is, does my cursor work here? Is in this area. This is the Park Place North, and of course, this is the Park Place West subdivision. So you can see how the three developments are interrelated and connected, and how they will fit together in this area of the East Fenwick secondary plan area, what is known as Neighborhood 1. From a policy perspective, the lands are located within the settlement area in accordance with the provincial policy statement, and delineated built-up area in the growth plan. The settlement area, of course, is the area under which urban growth is to be directed. Similarly, in the Niagara Region's official plan, the lands are also designated as a built-up area, and the policies with respect to this area allow for a mix of densities and lot sizes to accommodate housing needs through all stages of life, as well as providing for a range of housing prices and affordability. And again, new residential development and intensification is encouraged to be planned and designed to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change by facilitating a compact built form and incorporating sustainable housing construction materials or practices, green infrastructure, and as well as energy conservation standards and water efficient technologies for low impact development. With respect to the town's official plan, the lands are located within the East Fenwick secondary plan area and are designated East Fenwick low density, EF low density residential.
East Font Hill.
East Font Hill.
East Font Hill.
Yes.
East Fenwick is the next meeting.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh boy, it's been a long day already. So permitted uses include single detached, semi-detached dwelling units, and townhouse units are allowed in plans of subdivisions, provided they don't exceed 60% of the dwelling units. And in this case, the townhouses would comprise 37% of the dwelling units in this plan of subdivision. As indicated, it's located in Neighborhood 1, and the density in Neighborhood 1 is to be 57 persons and jobs per hectare combined. So the following is a chart that outlines the proposed changes to the zoning bylaw amendment that's being requested by the applicant. This is the changes to for single detached dwellings. It will continue to have a site-specific R2 150 zone category, but we're looking at, the applicant is requesting a reduction to the minimum lot frontage and lot area for single detached dwellings to provide for smaller single detached dwellings. This is in response to some of the changes in market conditions. And then aligning some of the other standards with what currently exists in the town's new zoning bylaw. So that's the reasons for the changes that are being requested for the single detached lots. For the semi-detached lots, there's some minor changes here that are being proposed. And again, some of these are to align with some of the updates through the new zoning bylaw. But of note, they're looking to reduce the rear yard setback to 6 meters in this case for semi-detached, and a reduction to the side yard setback from 0.6 meters on one side. And then for street townhouses, this is also what is being proposed here. Again, this is to align with the current updated provisions in the new zoning bylaw. So with respect to the comments received, there were some comments from Town Public Works. They don't object to the proposed changes, but they had some comments with respect to some of the preliminary engineering drawings, and those will be dealt with as conditions of draft plan approval, as well as comments from the Region of Niagara, the Region of Niagara Growth Strategy and Economic Development Department. They do not object to the proposed red line modification to the plan of subdivision or the zoning bylaw amendment, and note that the application is consistent and conforms to regional and provincial plan and policies. There were no comments received from public comments with respect to this application to date. And then the technical reports that were prepared and submitted with this application include a functional servicing report, a planning justification report, and a stage 1-2 archaeological study, and those are available for viewing at the Towns Engaging Pelham webpage. So to conclude, there has been, of course, no recommendation and no decision made on these applications. This public meeting is to receive comments, and then once we've received all the comments, a recommendation report will be presented to council at a later date. And then if anybody wishes to receive notice, they should either sign the sign-in sheet or provide contact information, and either to myself or to Shannon LaRocque, and her contact information is available there. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your report. To Director Bar, Ms. Weens, I turn to the clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, we do have the the agent for this file, Mr. Craig Rowe of Upper Canada Consultants, and Mr. Rowe does have a presentation for us.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Farther in the middle. Awesome. Thank you. Well, good evening, council members, staff, and residents. My name is Craig Rowe. I'm a senior planner with Upper Canada Consultants. I'm the agent on the file on behalf of our client, Mountain View Homes, and with me tonight is Mr. Matt Vartanian from Mountain View. So if you have any questions more about the build outside the planning, Matt's available to answer those questions for you as well. So staff has provided a very detailed overview from a technical standpoint about the application. So without repeating a lot of what staff said, I'd like to kind of walk you through just some of the key elements of the development, help you understand really the impetus behind the changes and what we're ultimately going for. There we go. So as some council members may recall, the original applications for draft plan subdivision zoning amendment were considered and approved in 2022. The original development did not fully extend all the way up to the Sobeys lands. And where the drainage channel is. So this left a small gap in the development and basically prohibited the ability for the planned Norgate Way, which is a north-south road that goes from Summersides up to connect into Meridian Way. So in the time since those applications were approved, Mountain View has gone and worked with the neighbors. They've received approval of severance applications to take the rear lands of those properties and add them into the development area. So now we have a fulsome development which goes all the way up to the drainage channel, and now we have the ability to connect Norgate all the way through and basically merge the residential developments to the south with the commercial areas up at the north. The related zoning bylaw amendment, it generally extends the previous approvals that were granted, albeit we now have to carry the single detached zoning all the way up and across the northern portion of the site, and then extending our zoning, the RM1 site-specific zoning for the semi-detached and the street townhouses that are in the middle island of the development. One of the nuances to our application, as you may see if you look at the technical documents, that we're technically amending from RD residential development, which is a bit of a hold zone, to these two zones. So the lands do have zone status. It's just when they were approved, then the town approved their new comprehensive zoning bylaw. So as part of that consolidation, it was an oversight. So we said, rather than making a mess of all this, we'll just come in, explain how this is all working. But basically, we're just expanding that zoning that was previously approved by council and modernizing it and zeroing out to the new standards of the bylaw so everything's consistent. So in terms of the red line changes that we proposed, the original plan of subdivision had 36 units. So now we're up to 65 units that are proposed. So on the screen, you can see the increase in the overall unit count. So where originally we had 12 singles, we're now to 27. Where we had 16 semi-detached dwelling units, we now have 14. And where we had 18 street townhouse units, we now have 24. And there's also been those minor adjustments, which Ms. Ween spoke about, the orphan lands from Park Place South, integrating that in to make sure that whole lots are being approved as part of the subdivision approval, and we're not left with any fragments. So this was the original Park Place West subdivision plan, which was draft approved by council. As you see, larger single detached lots on the western side. On the other side of Shaw Avenue are the semi-detached, and then on the other side are the street townhouses, which would be fronting onto Norgate Way. And then you see the break at the top of that with the Sobeys lands up above it. This is the amended plan. As you can see down the south, those are those additional lands from Park Place South, which have been added in to fix the geometry of the plan. And then those two additional lots, 1433 and 1435, have been added in, giving us the full connection right up to the drainage channel and completing the development overall. To give you a better sense of what this looks like, we've put together this colorized plan. So as you can see in the bottom of the page, which is west, we now have these smaller size singles, which are still on the western side of the development, but we also have singles along the north. Then we have our semi-detached dwellings generally in the center with one townhouse block on the corner. And then on the other side, we have street townhouse dwellings as well, fronting onto Norgate. And just past this in Park Place South, we have a mix of street townhouses and rear lane townhouses that will be built as part of that phase of development. Skip ahead. So this was the zoning schedule that was passed by the town previously. The red is the R2 zoning, so that corresponds with where the single detached lots were proposed, and then the blue is the RM1 zoning, which was approved. So the amended schedule looks like this, again carrying that R2 site-specific zoning along the western boundary and up across the north, lining up with the singles. And then under the RM1 zoning, it does permit semi-detached dwellings and townhouse dwellings. So it'll be under the same zone code, but it'll just have different provisions for each. So I just provide a couple of charts in here, and you can see the key map to see where this zoning essentially applies to. So in terms of the changes to the single detached zoning, one of the most prominent changes we have is a reduction in the lot frontage to bring this down to 8-meter frontages. Part of this is due to market conditions, but it's also a very unique way to get some additional single detached dwellings, which are typical for the Fawn Hill area, but at a scale which can be considered a bit more affordable. So we're integrating a nice transition of the larger single detached dwellings on Station Street, transitioning to something a little bit smaller than our semis, our street towns, and more street towns in Park Place South and the rear lane towns. So it offers a little bit of flexibility. And concurrent with that, with the smaller lot frontage, of course, we have a smaller lot area. In terms of the maximum front yard, we've asked for a deletion of this. This is namely to deal with our corner lots where we have to push the dwellings a little bit further back to make sure that we have enough room for the driveway to get in, that the building is appropriately set back from other buildings on the corners, and that we can have appropriate landscaping in there. One of the things that allows for these smaller singles to go forward is a change in the minimum side yard setbacks. So we're implementing, which is becoming a bit more of a standard practice, is smaller side yard setbacks for single detached dwellings. And what effectively it looks like is on one side of the dwelling, you have a 0.6 meter or 2 foot setback. And on that side of the dwelling, there's no windows. It's just the facade. You typically have your utility meters, air conditioners. But then on the other side, you have the larger setback of 1.2 meters, which is 4 feet. So you end up with breaks in the areas where there's no windows of 4 feet between the dwellings. And then on the other side, you end up with an 8-foot break. So it still allows for drainage to be conveyed through there. You can still provide all your mechanical to your units, and it also allows you opportunities to push the driveways closer together and create more opportunities for on-street parking, breaking up the streetscape, better opportunities for landscaping in the boulevard as well. And then in addition to that, the minimum rear yard reduction is to be reflective of the previously granted rear yard setback from the zoning bylaw amendment from 2022. 6 meters was granted there. We'd just like to carry it forward as part of this. And then deleting the maximum lot coverage requirement, letting the setbacks lead the development form and massing. I will note that it says R2X zone. This should be RM1. That's a typo on my end, so I apologize for that. The changes here are to get rid of the maximum front yard setback of 6 meters and allow for a bit of augmentation to be permitted along the street to kind of break it up so it's not so monotonous. We also have the minimum rear yard setback. As you can see in the chart, 6 meter rear yard was granted through the previous zoning amendment. We're seeking to carry that forward. And then similar to the singles, getting rid of the maximum lot coverage requirement and letting the setbacks lead the massing of the development. And then lastly, with the street townhouse developments, we've reduced the overall minimum lot area to be consistent with what was granted with the previous amendment, getting rid of the maximum front yard requirement as well to provide those opportunities for augmentation, reclaiming the 6.0 meter rear yard, which was granted through the previous amendment. There was also a requirement for a landscape strip between the different forms of development. That was deleted before. We'd like to delete it again, and then lot coverage again, taking that out to let the setbacks prevail, allow for that to govern the built form. So in terms of the next steps, as Ms. Wiens alluded to, we have some preliminary comments from engineering and other town departments. We'll be working with them to address those comments. Any questions that you or the public have this evening, we'll be addressing those as well. Once everything's tidy and in good order and ready for recommendation, it'll come back to council for consideration, and should it be approved, we would move on to our detailed engineering design, then our clearance of conditions, and then we would be able to move forward with servicing on the site. If everything goes expeditiously, it could be as soon as this fall. And then after that, you'd likely be looking at home building sometime in 2025, depending on where the work program builds out. So with that being said, I'm happy to leave this up on the map or up on the screen for context. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Rowe. I believe now we go to public input.
Yes.
To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did not have any public pre-registered to speak. However, you may now open the floor to the in-person public should anyone wish to make comment.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the present that would like to approach the microphone and make any comment on this planning application? Yes, sir?
My house,
Oh, wait, first, please state your name.
Richard Turen, I live on 660 Welland Road.
Okay, thank
And
you.
my property is included in that. Why? First question.
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor, could I have the address repeated again? Our property.
60 Welland Road.
This.
Wait, I'm sorry, to the Director of Planning, Ms. Wiens.
Yeah, sorry, this, you're talking about the East Fenwick secondary plan, sir, and this application is dealing with a subdivision in Font Hill.
On Hill, not Fenwick?
No,
Not this one, the next one will be
Okay,
dealing with
sorry.
Fenwick.
Okay.
That's okay, no problem. Thank you, sir. Again, back to this application. Anyone present that has any comments or questions? Not seeing any. I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have also not received any emails during that period of time. Therefore, it is 5:56 p.m. and you may move on to committee input.
Okay, thank you very much. So we close the portion of public input, and we now go to committee input. Is there any comments from any member of council on this presentation? Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Wiens. Now, the stormwater management of this, which direction does that go? Does that go to, I'm going to ask you the question, which way does this go? And the other question I had is about waste management. I've seen a couple of the spots where townhouses are collecting their garbage in one spot, and there's a mountain there at the end of somebody's driveway or at the end of the parking, and it just looks like something that's almost unmanageable.
To the director.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, this area, the stormwater management is area that is being serviced by this is the pond that is adjacent to the wellspring site. So the waters in this area are directed to that storm pond. With respect to waste management, the property owners or individual household will be putting their garbage at the end of their driveway, and there will be garbage pickup like it is in any other residential area. So that it's not a centralized place for the site for garbage pickup. It's at the end of every individual driveway.
Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but it usually ends up being where people aren't parked, that's where the garbage gets collected, and we've seen that in a couple of places in town.
Typically, people will be putting it on their boulevard, like on the boulevard at the end of the driveway. That's where you place your garbage and your recycling bin. So if you're talking about if there are on-street parking in front, is that your question, or?
No, I'm talking about the situation where we have on-street parking. There's only a couple of places in the curb where they can bring the garbage up to the roadside, and that's where the garbage tends to collect, and I've seen that down at the Meridian Center, near the Meridian Center, and that's quite an unsightly and I would imagine not a desirable thing to be having done.
Ms. Weems?
Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly we can look into that, and we can speak with the regional waste contractor in terms of who's, they're the ones that are responsible for picking up the garbage. And so if there is a car parked there and they can't see the garbage, typically you want to make sure your garbage is out in front at the end of your driveway. And that's where the garbage is supposed to be picked up from, so it's visible.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Without going into the mechanics of how garbage is picked up, I'm satisfied with the answer, so,
Okay, thank you very much, thank you. And I believe Ms. Nesnick.
Yes, thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a couple questions, I think, for the developer. And I guess just a comment directed to Ms. Weens, too. So the maximum lot coverage, our bylaw does state that, has it been deleted, the most recent one?
To Ms. Weens.
Mr. Mayor, through you, in our zoning bylaw, we provide,
50%?
I believe it's 50% maximum lot coverage, yes.
Okay, so that's still in effect then?
Correct.
Correct, thank you. So here, it wants to delete it in all three areas, street, townhouse, semi-detached, and single detached. So I guess when I envisioned that, I just envisioned that you would be wanting to cover the lot to a higher degree of maximum lot coverage. So I do have a concern with regards to that. So I don't know if you can comment on that or what you're thinking in terms of your development, in terms of those single detached homes. What maximum lot coverage are you thinking?
To Mr. Rowe, please.
Thank you very much for the question, through Mr. Mayor. The setbacks are really, from a planning standpoint, are a great tool to ensure that you get balance in the built form. So ensuring that you have a reasonable backyard, a reasonable front yard, and all of that. And that tends to set the envelope which is considered appropriate for development. It's not to say that that envelope would be completely maxed out, but when you do provide a dwelling, especially on a small single lot, you're going to be using quite a bit of it to provide the ample amount of floor area. But at the same time, you're efficiently using that land. When you put on some additional add-ons, things like a covered deck, for example, counts towards your lot coverage and can cause it to go up even though it's not additional floor area. So it's our opinion that deleting the lot coverage and pairing it with the setbacks that are proposed, which we feel are reasonable, provide a good amount of flexibility there to have an adequately sized home on a smaller lot, and also provide flexibility for any additional structures that may go on the property.
To the counselor.
Right, so adequate size home, I guess, is just an opinion on people. So these are fairly small lots, as you have, I went back to feet, so, because I don't know, for houses, I still think in feet and yards. So an 8 meter is a 26-foot wide lot, which is quite narrow. The bylaw says it should be 39.7 feet. So I have no problem with moving towards these narrower lots, but I have a big concern that you're going to exceed that maximum lot coverage to such an extent that you're going to have a big home on a tiny little postage stamp, and that, and then charge, $1 million. So that's my concern, is that if you want it to be affordable, we want it to be affordable, and a house of a relative, 1,300, 1,500 square feet, if it's a 2-story, should easily fit on a lot that size. And so I'm hoping that the developer is not planning on maxing out this lot coverage. So I would prefer to see a percentage put on that proposed provision, rather than just leave it carte blanche for the developer, or at least have some conversation with that in that area. That's my one comment.
Yes, go ahead.
And then I guess back to the affordability of it. So Mountain View's been a great partner here in the town of Pelham and has built some beautiful homes. So as you say, moving towards more marketable properties, what is their thinking in terms of making these somewhat affordable for our newer, younger, or seniors wanting to move into some downsized homes? Thank you.
Thank you.
This is on? Okay, good. Through you, Mr. Mayor, exactly. I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to get away from those million singles, and we're trying to bring it down quite a bit. We're hoping that we can get these at least a couple $100,000 down from that. That's our intention here, and they'll still have four bedrooms and 2.5 baths in them as well. So we're still hoping that they're pretty accommodating while being at a lower price point. And yeah, just trying to get a better mix of units as well into the community with Park Place South and Park Place North as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just back to you. So really, a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath is still a fairly luxurious home in many people's views. Would there be some consideration that you would move to a 3-bedroom, maybe 2-bathroom or 1.5 bathroom with a garage and then just having that basement area available if they wanted someday in the future finish it themselves? I think, still having a 4-bedroom home, like I myself don't have a 4-bedroom home. I've never had a 4-bedroom home. We've raised 3 children quite happily in a 3-bedroom home, and then finished a basement and put an extra bedroom down there for our, when he got older. So to say a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath is not a luxurious home, I think is missing the point, to be totally honest with you. I think we need to start thinking of smaller, more affordable homes in a 3-bedroom, back towards that sort of thinking. So I would encourage you to move that, and you might even be able to drop it, like 400,000 rather than just 200,000. That would be to me, making it more affordable. And I understand the market, but those are my comments on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Nisnik. Any follow-up comments, sir?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that exactly that. Like we're quite a ways from going to market on this, so I think to give a price point at this point would be difficult.
Yeah.
I was just throwing that out as trying to give you some sort of response on that. But what I would say is, we are pretty flexible with the purchasers in terms of what they want to do internally with the homes. We try to keep these in terms of smaller lot sizes. And the setbacks, we're trying to keep them at a lower square footage, and that's really the intention here. It'd be 2,000 or less. It's very similar to an end unit townhouse more than anything else. So it is customizable for those homeowners, and they don't come with finished basements. So if they want that as an upgrade, they can always do that. We do try to work with our purchasers, and we're trying to bring something in the market that's a little more affordable, a little more attainable. That's really what we're trying to do. So thank you very much.
Councilor? Oh, you did? Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions to the presenters? Not seeing any. Ms. Weens, if I could just on what Councilor Olson said about the drainage, if that water goes into the stormwater that you suggested, then that will end up going down Port Robinson Road and going to the canal. That won't be going into the 12-Mile Creek, this section. Am I correct in that?
Mr. Mayor, yes, you are correct.
Okay.
It goes out towards the Singer's Drain, which goes through Thorold and into the canal.
Okay, yep, thank you. Not seeing any other questions or comments, I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the presentations of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink that committee receive report 2024-45 for information as it pertains to file numbers 26T1901-2022 and AM-11-2023, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. One last time, any questions or comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? See none opposed. Motion passes.
Thank you. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? See none opposed. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to our next item on the agenda, item 6. I will now read the notice requirements into the record. Town of Pelham Housekeeping Zoning bylaw amendment, East Fenwick Secondary Plan. The Planning Act requires under Section 22 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed East Fenwick Secondary Plan. The proposed plan is a statutory document that will guide future development in the East Fenwick area. East Fenwick is an identified growth area in the town's official plan and is the proposed plan balances protection of its natural heritage system with support for the economic growth of Fenwick. It will further enhance Fenwick's village character while establishing a pedestrian and cyclist-friendly, compact, and sustainable community. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of this statutory public meeting was published on January 22nd, 2024, to the town's website and social media platforms, on the Housekeeping Amendment Project page, and posted in the Voice of Pelham's website at Pelham Today. Additionally, a copy of the notice was emailed to all interested stakeholders who had provided contact information during the public open house and mailed out to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject area. In addition to providing information, we'll also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will follow the staff presentation shortly. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decisions have been made on the proposed amendments, and therefore any comments received will be considered by council. To you, Mr. Mayor, we do have our policy planner, Lindsay Richardson, as well as our consultant, Ute, who is joining us via Zoom today. Lindsay is in person, and I turn it over to staff.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to the one on Zoom. Is going to do the presenting? Okay, thank you.
Ute, we see that you've joined us. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. You may proceed with your
Yep,
presentation.
you have the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council and town staff and residents. We'll share my screen. Can you see my presentation okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. So we put together a presentation that really encompasses the work that started back in 2017. We went through quite an enormous amount of work. Then we got pushed back by the pandemic, and then we were able to retake the reins of the process. So I'm very glad to bring you the latest iteration and the fruit of all this work. So wanted to go back to the purpose of the study, and as the clerk has already read, it's really the intent of any secondary plan, in this case East Fenwick, is to guide the future growth and development of portion or part of East of Fenwick that has been identified as a growth area by the official plan, existing official plan. So in the process of putting together a secondary plan, you look at several factors. You have a team of civil engineers, transportation engineers, built heritage, and then obviously planners and urban designers. And in the process of really making sense of what the town is and how development and future growth should occur, you pay attention and outlining how new development will be compatible with the existing conditions of and the character of Fenwick, which I will kind of guide you through in the final production of schedules that really identify how the character of the town and the assets of their natural heritage that are currently in place. So through secondary plans, you also establish appropriate land use designations and policies that allow you to manage development as it comes in. It allows you to establish design guidelines for buildings, parks, and streets, so you end up with the type of community that really fits into the existing Fenwick proper. We also establish a system of public space areas and linkages that really contribute to the notion of a walkable community. And then in that process, we also get into the implementation phasing plan, as well as identifying the upgrades to transportation and infrastructure that need to be in place through the development growth to allow for this sort of growth. So just to briefly recap, the study had 4 phases, and the first phase started back in May 2017. Phase 1 usually collects and analyzes data, existing conditions. Phase 2 usually deals with the land use design options. We had a really absolutely amazing design options workshop back in September 2017 at Fire Station with really great attendance. We also brought a series of land use options to council back then. During phase 3, it's when you start crafting the secondary plan policy and the schedules that I'm going to show next. We had a preferred plan open house in January 2018, and then council presentation update on April 2018. And finally, the secondary approval where all the policies and the final public input come together to put forward a vision for the lands. So we had a statutory open house back in 2019, formal public council presentation as well in 2019. Then we had a statutory open house just now on November 30th at the Fire Hall with attendance about 40 people. We received really important comments that we have incorporated into the crafting of the policy and the schedules that are going to follow, as well as today's council presentation. So the preferred plan, which is really just a compilation of all the input that we have received through all these years and the studies that our team has conducted, really starts through the outlining of what the current official plan designations permit, which you can see in your screen contain a series of land uses that include a greenfield overlay, which is in the kind of the darker yellow. A greenfield overlay was subject to further policy, which is it has the hatching on top of it, which require different densities that have to be achieved through development. Then there is the built boundary, which is in the softer yellow, that allow for future growth to happen up to Cream Street and immediately kind of south of Welland Road. There's an environmental protection EP3 area that's briefly outlined. It's just that at the very high level that needed to also be further studied, and you will see how that initial mass evolves into the environmental areas that now we are outlining, obviously existing roads, and the growth area boundary which really kind of demarcated how back in the previous official plan, the town was envisioned to grow up to Cream Street and up to obviously Memorial Drive to the north, immediately south of Welland Road to the south, and then up to Balfour Road Street as it kind of meanders through existing development or existing homes. So out through our strategy put forward, we came up with 4 kind of guiding frameworks that really give you the strategy and the guidance to manage and to oversee and to approve development as different developers come and put forward options. So one of the main key structures on how you think about a neighborhood growing is that we're thinking about very well identifiable neighborhood cells, and a neighborhood is usually identifiable by a clear center, which can be in larger neighborhoods, a park and a school combination. In our case, because we have more discrete areas, it's usually associated with a park, and we see a park being located at the center of the neighborhood. So we have two clearly distinctive neighborhoods, one north of Canberra Road, one in between Canberra Road and Welland Road. We see the environmental system that it started with the outline of the provincial significant wetland that you saw in the previous slide, really evolve into a more complete system based through the studies that our initial team and the development group team conducted. You start to see a connectivity that allows all the open spaces to link to each other. So the neighborhood structure really gives us a series of land uses that I will further describe in the next slides. The next big element or structural element is your greenlands structure, and I cannot highlight the importance of having a well-defined greenlands structure to really be the framework on which you envision and plan for any future parkland and open spaces. It has to make sense as a system, so you don't end up with park spaces that are really at the back of things, that are really not connecting to the entirety of the network, that are not accessible through either streets or through other connected to environmental areas. So in this case, the integrated network, it's using and conserving and protecting the natural heritage system that we are identifying in the dark green. We're also through further studies, identifying a really key woodlot on the easterly part of the lands between Balford and Welland. We're identifying a connector or corridor linkage that links the woodlot to the existing wetland area. Wetland areas and environmental features have been well defined in this area. Areas that still have to be studied have been identified with a hatch. So it's a reminder as development comes in the future that as part of a development submission, developers have to conduct the full suite of environmental studies, and that's left as a reminder here in a hatch identifiable layer. We also have a stormwater management pond that has been quite kind of defined for the lands between Balford and Welland. It's located in the southern portion of Welland Road, just understanding how that also integrates environmental areas and how it works with environmental areas. There is a symbol for a stormwater management pond in the lands north of Canberra Road that eventually will also have to be defined in any future development submission. So in linking all these different layers of what constitutes a Greenland structure system, there's the possibility to link through trails, passive trails, each one of these assets, and that's the dash line represented here. There is obviously still factors of implementation. There is private lands, there is lands that will be conveyed through development. So it's a vision that if the public and the town is behind, it can continue and it can be implemented as development comes in and lands can start assemble into forming a circuit. So a Greenland structure plan ends up being transformed into a series of land uses. As you can see, the natural heritage system in dark green, and the environmental corridor linking in a softer green, open spaces, which are your standard neighborhood parks at the center of neighborhoods, stormwater management facilities that still need to be integrated into the larger context of your open space, so they don't end up being remnants or leftovers of how you experience a particular open space system. There are areas that still need to be, they're subject to future environmental impact studies as lands continue to develop. There's the 2 to 5 minute walking neighborhood that really kind of shows you the extent and scale of a neighborhood, and obviously the trail system that looks into connecting each one of these areas into one single circuit. The third building element of how you think of communities is your road structure plan. And the road structure that we are putting forward is really trying to connect existing streets through the lands, so you end up facilitating pedestrian as well as vehicular circulation. In this instance, there were few instances in which we could really kind of tie into the existing context. So you can see here, Sunset Drive is one of the roads that kind of intersect the future growth area. So we are extending that link. So there is a little bit of more of a pedestrian circulation as well as vehicular circulation. It was very important from the transportation perspective to have at least one north-south spine from going from Memorial Drive to Welland Road as a means of facilitate vehicular circulation and avoiding the issues that cul-de-sacs or very enclosed neighborhoods have the legacy of those 60s neighborhoods that have left in the landscape. So there is an internal loop system that obviously speaks to how the lands, especially to the south, will be parceled out. And in the process of kind of thinking of we connect this neighborhood to the rest of Fenwick, obviously there's a balance between the green infrastructure and the road infrastructure. So ideally, in thinking of new communities, you will want to have an east-west mid-block vehicular connection. But in the balance of having a woodlot and obviously an environmental corridor, that was not possible. So at the very minimum, we want to encourage the pedestrian passage through, and then that's represented in this dash line. So it still allows for active transportation. It's not vehicular, but the intent of having that connectivity is part of how we thought of the community. So in the process of thinking of that, we obviously have kind of a hierarchy of roads. So you have the existing road network, you have an existing cycling network that's part of your future plan. We have a proposed cycling network, which makes the main spines and the local streets that will be built in the future all shareable and bicycle friendly. We also extending the idea of Canberra Road as a wonderful promenade that's historical and really links back to Fun Hill and the potential to carry its own cycling facility. We also have an internal minor collector roads that connect you from Memorial the way to Welland and local roads. We also went through an exercise of designing, putting forward different street cross sections. On the screen, you can see some ideas on how Canberra, on the north side of Canberra, can be, as development comes in, and it's not intended to happen without development being coming forward. We can explore the idea of continuing that sidewalk that's currently really stops almost adjacent to Sunset Drive, and continuing that sidewalk and potential cycling network all the way to Fun Hill as a key kind of celebration of the historic quality of Canberra as a First Nations road. So we developed that. We developed a street cross section for Cream Street, Balfour, Welland, as well as internal roads. And then finally, all these layers come together to put together a land use structure plan. And I think through conversations with residents, it became very obvious, and the message was very clear in that people wanted to see the character of Fenwick be preserved, but also welcoming other housing opportunities. There's people that will like to see the children stay in town, people that will like to downsize and stay in town. So a strategy in which there's kind of an inverted strategy in which the land uses framing all existing roads that are really, especially Canberra Road being so iconic really within the town, will have a very different performance standard and very different flavor, so to speak, character of the type of buildings that you can build on anything at the periphery, and a very different kind of mix of housing that can be built internal to the site. Part of the land uses is also the open spaces, the stormwater management, and it's through policy that you have to kind of outline the characteristics and the requirements of each one of the colors and the land uses that you see on the screen. But all in all, we wanted to have a strategy, a build form and land uses strategy that really encourage development, but protects the character of the village, character of Fenwick. And it really kind of puts forward the best strategies to continue to provide housing, affordable housing, and a life cycle of housing for people to remain in town if as they age or as they move on with their lives. So the land uses are basically the East Fenwick Village Residential, which is everything that's at the periphery that has a different character. The central is the darker yellow, which is the East Fenwick Neighborhood Residential, and the greens that are basically all the open space system and open space land uses that I have spoken to. But I wanted to briefly kind of walk you through what I mean when we are referring to the East Fenwick Village Residential. And these are the two primary kind of main contributions that this plan makes to ensuring that the character of the town continues to be built on, and the town also has housing options. So the East Fenwick, the light yellow, really envisions the development to be residential in nature. Is either single and semi-detached homes. There is a preference for front setbacks that really kind of mimic what occurs along Canberra Road. And more than anything, it's a strategy on how you deal with parking and garages. So you end up with a very distinctive kind of minimized presence of cars and driveways. That's really what becomes very evident in the core and the older parts of Fenwick, where the prevalence of the car presence is not as in more modern development. So that is the impetus of the East Fenwick Village Residential designation. And then you have the inner designation, the neighborhood residential, which gives you more of the full kind of range of housing. It can go anything from singles to towns and small scale apartments. It has a different strategy on how you park. There's the full gamut of how you can use detached garage, attached garages. There is the strategy of incorporating hedgerows and any existing natural features that are not really part of the wonderful green structure that I have showcased in the other schedules as part of maybe features in longer backyards, deeper backyards. So there's a full kind of set of policies that allows now the town to manage development as comes in. And while allowing for a range of housing, it also takes care of how the future community will look in its totality. And then once again, you have all the stipulations and all the policy requirements that go into how the park should be built, what is the characteristic of the central park, how we are promoting that you have eyes on the park and not backing onto the park so it's safer, how it has to be accessible to all and part of the network, special policy areas that will require further study in the future, and obviously the natural heritage system that kind of ensures that existing wetlands and important environmental corridors, as identified by the environmental teams, remain in place. And then finally, there's a series of layers of all the realities of the infrastructure that goes into supporting future development. So there is the effective and efficient transportation network by introducing the roads that I spoke to. There have been studies into studying how the servicing is going to be procured. There's a potential of a lift station requirement. The serving capacity was studied to make sure that there's enough capacity. There's ongoing studies on the future stormwater management requirements, size, location, and interface with the environmental area to make sure that it withstands the requirements of future or water absorption and any flood issues that may come up. So there is a full suite of servicing and infrastructure key elements that need to be studied and submitted as each development proponent comes in. But this plan in its totality kind of sets the stage and the elements that the municipality will have to pay attention to as development comes in and seeks approval through a draft plan of subdivision of future homes. So that's the entirety of the study process, and I can flip to any of this slides if you have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and sorry for the length of the presentation.
No, quite the opposite. It's a very detailed presentation, and this council definitely appreciates that, as I'm sure the residents also. So thank you for that presentation, and I will turn to the clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a number of public speakers in attendance this afternoon. I will begin with our pre-registered members of the public, and I will invite you to the podium in order of registration. So firstly, we did have Ron and Irene Burrell, but they have advised that they will no longer be speaking this evening. So that brings us to Graham Pett of PATH. When you do attend the microphone, please turn it on. There is a button, and the microphone will turn green. Thank you.
I think we have it.
Hey, you have the floor.
Sorry. Good evening, Mayor Junkin, Town of Pelham councilors, and the Pelham town staff as well. I'm a director of Pelham Advocates for Trees and Habitat, otherwise known as PATH. And I appear tonight on behalf of our board of directors. We have 3 others who are in attendance at our membership. PATH previously provided a letter to Town of Pelham Planning regarding our comments in this matter dated January 23rd. That's obviously identified in the file. I presume you've read it, so I'm not going to read that letter tonight. What I want to do is just hit on some of the important points that we were trying to communicate in that letter. I would mention that I and a number of our directors did attend the open house, and we found it very informative. We chance to talk to the consultants and to town staff as well, and certainly it was a well-run open house. Our first comment is, I must say, we are very pleased to see the amount of green in this development. We are, after all, a green organization. Of course, it also tells us that these lands are highly environmentally sensitive, and we much appreciate the proposals to protect these lands. On the west side of the development is a large green area has been identified, and on learning this is to be a protected woodlands, this to us was simply fantastic news. The amount of green area on this plan informs us that hopefully maybe past lessons are being learned from the past. In fact, when we heard the earlier presentation tonight, when we have seen clear cutting of very mature forests in East Font Hill, where not one tree was left standing, it's very heartening to us to see that proaction is being initiated here to save what looks to be a very mature and important woodlands. And that's critical because, as we know, having studied the tree canopy, we need to save as many trees as we can. We need not only save our canopy, but we need to grow it. And clearly also, in this time of climate change, we need trees, among other things, to help us mitigate the effects of human behavior when it comes to our climate footprint. So we hope this certainly is a modus operandi going forward. Regarding this preserved woodland, we understand in conversations at this point, it doesn't have a specific environmental designation at this point. That is certainly something we would be requesting. We assume it would be given some important protections as a significant woodland or something along those lines. So we certainly would be very interested in learning what's going to happen in terms of the designation of those woodlands. And the other thing is who's going to be responsible for maintaining those woodlands as well, whether the town will be assuming control of that or whether the developer or, except of course when the developer turns over the development to the town, presuming it's the town that would be responsible. But nonetheless, it's an issue of concern. The linkage of these woodlands via green corridor over to the Greenland system with an accompanying trail system is a wonderful addition to this plan. We wholeheartedly concur with the concept of the 2 to 5 minute walking distance to a green space objective. Just moving slightly beyond that, in terms of the redevelopment of Canberra Road, certainly looks impressive, and if the goal is to link that to Font Hill, that's also a great development for sure. We also wonder, in terms of how that will be managed going down into Fenwick, because it looks like the development will stop at Bellefleur. So what's going to happen if we're trying to encourage walking and biking, into downtown Fenwick, just in terms of what may be required to facilitate that as well, because obviously the more we can get people out in nature and walking and biking, then we keep cars off the road. Although not officially designated in the plan from what we've seen at this point in conversations with town planning, we understand low-impact development practices will be integrated into this development. Again, we strongly support that. We just had a conversation the other day with Vineland Research Center that they have just completed a development in Lincoln with a developer where they developed a new subdivision with no stormwater management ponds. They've completely used an LID approach in this regard. And as we know, and I'm sure you saw the report a while ago, obviously you did, about the liability that the town has in terms of these stormwater management ponds, it would seem that if we can minimize them or get rid of them or not have to build new ones, then that's going to help the town, obviously, in terms of future budgetary issues, et cetera, et cetera. So we certainly would hope that that might be an initiative to consult with the Vineland Research Center to look at what they're doing over there in Lincoln. The other issues is that we certainly would hope the town and will direct developers to do a thorough investigation and ultimately to offer, hopefully, alternatives of heating and cooling systems to fossil fuels. It seems, looking at the contained nature of this development, 750 residential units planned, that issues not only in terms of heat pumps, but whether other matters such as, geothermal, centralized district heating, energy generation, et cetera, could be explored. It seemed that this would be an ideal opportunity to really explore that and to be out on the cutting edge. And we know there are companies in Niagara who are doing this, providing these services right now. A big development, Oakville, is already doing this as well. So certainly there's something we really encourage because obviously we need to take steps to mitigate, again, our carbon footprint. We would also ask that, and we've had discussions in terms of the official plan, but for all new residential units built, we would request that 2 mature trees be planted somehow, whether on that property or not. And in this case also in terms of a study in terms of whether reforestation or additional forestry work would need to be done in the green areas to, again, just make that a healthier ecosystem as well. And again, this all goes back to any way we can attempt to mitigate our carbon footprint, obviously is very, very critical. Finally, the issue of, we just want to discuss briefly the issue of density in terms of this, because there's obviously 3 levels of building density that we're looking at in this case. I think it's very clear we have very little land left to develop in Pelham. The land is precious at this point. But we also have the reality, and I think Councillor Mystic hit it on the head in terms of we're building way too big of houses and residential units for a population. Because we know, certainly over the last census period, we have 1.5 residents in a residential unit, and to be building 2,000 square foot places with 4 bedrooms, this is nonsensical. I don't think this is just going to be, simply it's not sustainable as a society if we keep doing this and when we have such little land available to develop in the future. So we would really request a relook at the densities in the boundary areas of 8 to 15 units per hectare. We just feel this is too low. We understand, we're trying to maintain the character of Fenwick, and it certainly is a beautiful town. We realize that, but we just think 8 to 15 units per hectare is just way too low a density for the preciousness of this land that we have at this point in time. Because the reality is, if we keep doing kind of what we're doing now, we're not going to come anywhere close to meeting what supposedly are our population density targets for 2051 as the official plans are laying out at this point in time. So in conclusion, PATH believes the proposed East Fenwick secondary plan represents a major step forward in the annals of development planning in Pelham, and for dutifully acknowledging, along with preserving, the irreplaceable natural heritage characteristics of these lands. I thank you for your time and attention.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And just so that everyone is aware, we hear from all the presenters, and then council will, any questions or comments on the presentations we will make at the end of the last presentation. So we'll be holding on to our questions until the very last presenter has presented. To the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Our next speaker is John Clausen, and Mr. Clausen is joining us via Zoom. We're just letting him in. Just allow us a moment.
Okay. Mr. Clausen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just unmuted myself.
Okay, yeah, you have the floor, sir.
I live in the area. I live on Memorial Drive, and I've built 2 houses on Memorial Drive, and I've been there for 40 years. I've heard the gentleman talk about density and whatever. What they have to look at, and I haven't heard any mention, the demographics are going to change. If you look at our labor requirements now and what's happening in the future, I'm from the baby boomers. In 10 years, we're going to go the other way. We're not going to need the kind of housing that people suggest. We're going to have a lot of vacant land or housing in the future if we aren't careful. The other thing is a lot of these woodlands are private. And they're owned in such a way that they're not going to be subject to development. So I don't see, I mean, we have to look after our land. We have to pay for the various aspects of what we had, the moth problem and what have you. So I don't see that. The other thing, the land is sand. And where our area is, it's quicksand. We don't have to dig more than 5-6 feet down, and boy, can you, the water table is right there. So we're gonna have to look at that, and I'm talking mainly north of Canberra. I'm not familiar with the southern portion, but we're going to have to look at soil conditions. Lincoln has different soil conditions, totally different. We have to look at the uniqueness. We can't really go to other people to try and figure out what to do. You have to look at the soil conditions. The other thing, electrical requirements have never, we've got in our family an electric car. Let me tell you, have we ever learned something about electric requirements? My son tore out his 100 amp service and put 200 amp service so he could put a 60 amp service in to charge a car, which means the underground servicing, that's gonna have a big effect as to what we can bring. What has Font Hill, like the Pelham, have we got enough capacity to even put a development like this in? I looked at the previous where you have all these houses coming in and people are gonna buy electric cars. Let me tell you, if you do the calculation, the power requirements, and you want a car to charge it not in 12 or 14 hours overnight, you'd like to at least get 2 to 3 hours. We have to look at that. And the other major thing is we've been there is wildlife manure. Where we live now, we watch the wild turkeys. We watch the fox play around. My wife is getting upset. The deer come in, they eat her garden, but you know, it's nice to see the deer. We've got the coyotes. My son was walking his dog, and all of a sudden there was a set of eyes, and there's the coyotes staring at and looking at the dog. We have all kinds of snakes. In my cabana, we had the rat snakes in there. We have a nice red-tailed hawk nesting in our area. And these wildlife, they move around. They even go south of, and we're somehow going to have to, whatever development is, we're going to have to look at what we're going to do with this wildlife. I mean, it's been there for 40 years. I mean, we have to be very careful. I've noticed that she's trying to, with a pathway, join the woodland and what have you. But when you start bringing these people in, you're also going to create some kind of a problem with the wildlife to move. And how much impact we can give that. But making these points, I'm not against development. The other thing you're talking about house sizes and low-cost housing. I'm in the construction game. There's no such thing as low-cost housing. The only way you can make a house cheaper is to make it smaller. And there are a lot of people like to live in the area. It's a personal decision. Don't tell me how big a house I should have or what I should have, right? People would say right now we're not very good stewards because we got a big house and there's only two of us. Well, that's our choice. I mean, people come to Fenwick, they would like to have a big house, but this low-cost housing, people better start thinking about maybe figuring another way of getting houses, affording them, learning to do a lot of things yourself, saving like we did. We had to save for the first 10 years of our marriage till we had enough money to get going. Not that people can expect that we're going to give them their houses right off the bat. The young people have to learn how to work and learn how to save and how to economize and figure this out. And I come from a generation, a lot of us have done it. I've had children, and we have children, they've done it. The low-cost housing is a misnomer. Environmentally, heat pumps are a great strategy to use. I have a heat pump. I have gas backup. To say that we want to get rid of fossil fuels, you're dreaming. We need them. We've seen that since we've had electric cars. We need cars that run on fossil fuel. The cold has a huge effect. Down here in Florida, I see the effect that the heat has on the electric cars. Electric cars have some very strong problems with them, temperature-wise. You need a mix. You need a mix of, and what I found that my gas bill isn't too high. I've used very little gas because I got the heat pump, and air-sourced heat pump. To go in the ground, you're gonna have problems. When you start running pipes and pumps, not only maintenance, but your heat pump doesn't work as well. Once you get the pipes, they get sediment and everything else, and your heat capacity, everything changes. The most efficient thing I found in the years I've been building is a heat pump with a natural gas backup, where you can get natural gas. But I think some of the stuff I hear, you have to do a little more research. And I think the biggest research we have to do at Fenwick is with our soils conditions. We got to do electric, how we're going to service it, what we're going to do with the wildlife, how are we going to allow them to maneuver, and with the population, what are we going to do in 10 years? We think we have a problem now, but look at, especially here in the States, I see they're going to these university people graduating and taking out trades and that, because there's a huge shortage of trades, and it's only going to get worse. At the tail end, when I retired, I already was having trouble finding people. And my generation, from 1946 to 1960, we are going to see a huge change, because there's articles I was reading here that kids now, like my grandchild, they don't have cousins like they used to in the old days. We have a negative population growth, so we need to bring in what you call immigrants and what have you, because we haven't got it. But every country has. After a while, why would you leave the country you're living in? They got the same problem we have. So we have to do a little more studying on how we really want to put a neighborhood together. And the other thing is look at what people want. There are some people that like a big house, some want a small house. Don't make judgments on whether we should be living in a smaller or whatever. When I look at, you're going to put 26-foot frontage lots in there. I tell you, you talk about putting problems. You're going to have a problem with your stormwater. You're going to have a huge amount of sewage. Sewage is your number one problem. I mean, methane produces what have you. You want as little, cut back on sewage, not more, but you look at when you got a high density, you got also a high density of use of electricity, high density of sewage, and a high density of water usage. So those are also problems. How do you spread it out? Well, it'll be spread out sooner, but I think that not enough study on our end, the north end. But what I learned today from Utah is that there still has to be environmental studies on our end. You've done them on the south end. So I will end it there and say, once you've done the studies, then I will have further comments to see whether the approach they've used, how it will work with where we live in, because we have right now no desire to move or anything, but we want to keep the environment that we've been looking at for 40 years, and the trees and everything, that's all, we all private owned. I love the neighbor we got just down there. He bought acreage and he's keeping it woodland. He's a strong proponent of the environment, and I love the neighborhood, but I'll leave it at that. And I liked, Uta, your presentation. I talked to you on November 30th. You met me there. And I just think on our end, the north end, if you want to talk to me, I'll go through the requirements that we need, but you have to look. We have a very, very unique area there. Soil, wildlife, and what have you. And I thank you very much for being able to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klassen, for your wide-ranging presentation. And we really do appreciate the scope of it. Believe me. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next speaker is Herb Sawatsky, and Mr. Sawatsky does have a presentation that Ms. LeGros will load for you.
Mr. Sawatsky, you have the floor when ready.
Am I operating these slides or is somebody else? Do you want me to? I can press a down key. I know how to do that.
Yep, right here, you're gonna just click on each one as you go through it. Here to here.
Or you know what, you can do it. Do that? Okay.
I can share it from my computer if you wish, and I can control it if you want.
Here, I'll just use it
You're
down.
good?
There we go.
Okay.
That works. Greetings, Mr. Mayor and Council, and friends and neighbors from Fenwick and Pelham. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. It was this afternoon earlier, but now it is this evening. I'm speaking to you personally. I live in Fenwick. I live 2 doors down from the library. If anybody wants to come by, we're the blue house with the yellow door. I look forward to speaking with Mr. John Klassen at some point. That would be fun. I also am a part of a climate action group called 50 by 30 Niagara. We've been around for about 2 years. We're a group, have about 700 on our mailing list and about 400 on Instagram. If I had known there's going to be this many people in the gallery, I would have brought along my sign-up sheet and I would have invited you all to be a part of it, but you can look us up on Instagram and Facebook yourselves. I'm asking today that the council, as you prepare the secondary plan for East Fenwick, that you include a provision to explore the feasibility of fossil fuel-free energy for the homes of East Fenwick. I'm going to have a small disagreement with my neighbor, John Klassen, here on this point. Invite the municipality to consider this and to either conduct the feasibility studies themselves or call on developers to do so. I'm frankly not completely caught up to speed on the details of how that stuff works, but you are and the planners here are. So I entrust that to you. Municipalities have direct control over direct and indirect control of half of all of Canada's emissions. Half of all of Canada's emissions go through municipalities. 80% of those emissions go through vehicles and buildings. The remainder goes through municipal waste, through agriculture, and through industry. Municipalities therefore have an outsized influence and an outsized impact on what Canada as a whole can do in order to meet its emissions reductions. You can do this through community design and through building standards. There are many communities that already have green development standards here in Ontario. This is a list of just 8 of them that helped the Federation of Canadian Municipalities put together its worksheet for how a community can put together green development standards. In other words, what I'm saying is you don't have to wait for the building code to be changed. It would be really helpful if the province would do even more on the building code to encourage, enhance, and make it possible for communities to get off of natural gas and to move to full electrification. However, we don't have to wait for that. The Niagara region has begun to work on a community energy plan. And as you know, Mr. Mayor, being a part of the Niagara region and having participated in the Niagara region's official plan, working on a community energy plan and green development standards is a part of the Niagara region's official plan. The Niagara region and many municipalities here in Southern Ontario, in Niagara, have declared a climate emergency. What we need to do then is take every single action and consider the climate and consider the environment as a part of our planning processes. You know, when I was 15 years old, 20 and 30 years felt like an impossibly long time away. Now that I'm 56, 27 years doesn't feel like that long, right? The year 2050 is 27 years away. My own kids will not be as old as I am today in 27 years. 2050 is not that long. And there's a lot that we can do in order to help reduce emissions, or in the case of new developments, not add any more to them. The Glendale Secondary Plan, as you see on this slide, already has a provision in it to consider sustainability measures related to resilience and climate change. I encourage you to look at the Glendale Secondary Plan and look at that key Direction 8, and you can simply copy and paste it and put into the secondary plan here for East Fenwick. I would strongly encourage you to consider district energy to provide for on-site renewable energy generation, cogeneration, and district energy systems. Now, cogeneration has to do with electricity production. I doubt that you would do that here. There are many Ontario companies that are already working on ground-sourced energy systems and district energy systems. I have listed only 5 of them here. Subterra Renewables and Enwave will operate a district energy system as a utility, exactly the way that Enwave does it. They will build it, they will install it, they will maintain it, and they will run it at no cost to developers, at no cost to the community. There is really no reason not to do this. The cost factors are not an issue on the developer's side or on the municipality's side. Toronto has a really neat program that you may have heard of called Enwave Deep Lake Water and Water Cooling. They have reduced energy consumption by 80% and emissions by 93%. This is the kind of technology that is available to us. It's proven, it's established. There are Ontario companies that are doing it. We can bring it here. Touching on what Mr. Clausen, the previous speaker, said, like him, I have an air source heat pump in my house. My house is 100 years old. We have a deed that goes back to 1908. I think we are the 4th or 5th owners in 100 years. So we put an air source heat pump because I'm not sure that we're going to be there more than 20, 25 years, although we might be. We paid about $10,000 for that. We may have heard that the national campaign or program for air source heat or for heat pumps is running out. But Enbridge here in Ontario has just begun a brand new program. So if anybody here is considering an air source heat pump for their home, I encourage you to look that up. Like Mr. Clausen, we've experienced the same thing. Our gas usage has gone down. Our utility bills are actually going down. I'm surprised by how much. We have we have a furnace to back up the heat pump, and it's working very well. Our natural gas reduction is about 35%, which is more than what Enbridge has said. But we've only had it for 8 months, so I don't have a year-on-year calculation yet. A geothermal system, which is a ground source system, is far more efficient and far more effective than an air source system. An air source system will have efficiency that depends on on the temperature of the air outside. A ground source system is always 4 times as efficient as a furnace is because the temperature in the ground doesn't really change. Now it does modulate, so you have to use your air conditioning in the summer to make sure that the ground stays consistent. A geothermal system for a 2,000 square foot home will cost $25,000. When we brought our air source heat pump, we got the furnace and the heat pump for $9,500. A furnace and an air conditioner will also cost $9,500. So you're going to spend at least $10,000 for your heating and cooling in any case. So this costs $15,000 more. You may have heard that the Ontario Energy Board wants Enbridge now to pay the full cost of a connections fee up front. That is an additional $4,000 if these new homes and these developments get natural gas, and if the Ontario Energy Board gets its way, which I hope it does. That's an additional $4,000 up front. Enbridge wants to spread that cost out over 40 years. According to Canada's climate commitment goals, in 40 years we should not be using any natural gas because we don't need it. We have other options that are highly viable and available to us. So this is going to cost $11,000 more than a conventional heating and cooling system. In your documents that I sent you, you have the source for this statement. It comes from the Canadian Home Inspection Association. They say in this paragraph that it will take many, many years to pay off this system. Everything I come across says that it takes about 10 years, and at that point, the fuel costs equalize with a conventional system. Had my neighbor John Clausen installed this system, a ground source system, when he moved into his home 40 years ago, he would be saving money for the last 25 to 30 years. If I ask my neighbors behind me how long they have lived in their homes, most of them, I'm going to guess, looking at their good looks and their youth, they've been in there a few more years than 10 years. The people who will move into East Fenwick, I gather, will not be moving out after 5 or 10 years. In other words, we will be saving them money if we go to a ground source system or to a district system. There are many funds that are available to this. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities has $5 billion set aside for district energy projects. Only half of that has been spent. They have money for case studies and feasibility studies and capital projects. They have money set aside for grants and loans for projects. Our very own regional councillor, Diana Houston, is our representative on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. She can set us up. I gave you the links. We can follow that as well. I think I've been speaking longer than I wanted to, so I thank you for your patience and your time. I was given the opportunity to go up to the Subterra Renewables project in Oakville. There's a local developer who is working on a project in Welland, Drew Toth with Elevate Living, who is very strongly considering bringing this ground source project to Welland and to his Lincoln development as well. It's fascinating stuff. I got interested in this because it just amazes me. This particular apartment is going to be 10 stories high. It's going to have 27 boreholes each, or 72 boreholes, each 900 feet deep. They will go into the ground and they will stay there for 100 years. Mr. Clausen, in his presentation, said that the boreholes for ground source heat pump get sediment in them. That is if it's an open system. If you put a borehole down into the ground and you just take groundwater and bring that up into your heat pump and then put that groundwater back into the ground, you're going to get sediment in your system. If you have a closed loop system, which is what most of them are, then the water that is in your system is never actually in the ground. It just runs through the loop. Sedimentation shouldn't be a problem. When it comes to replacing the equipment for a ground source geothermal, you're never going to replace the loops. The loops cost about $15,000 or more. Right? They stay in the ground for 100 years. They'll stay for a home, they'll be 60 years. Subterra said that for this apartment complex, they'll be in the ground for 100 years. When it comes time to replace the equipment, it is not going to cost $25,000. It'll cost the same as when you replace your furnace. I'll end it there. I think I've gone longer than I wanted.
Okay, thank you very much, Herb. Yes. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next public speaker is Rob Frizzle.
Please state your name, please.
Rob Frizzell.
Okay, and you have the floor.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thanks for having me. Planning staff. I did attend the last public meeting and I promised to get some comments back, and I didn't get around to it, so I've been worked on it today, so I apologize. I'm a professional hydrogeologist. I've been practicing for around 20 years, a little more than 20 years as a hydrogeologist. I'm not here in any official capacity, either through my company or anything else, just as a homeowner resident who's reviewed the report, and I think I can provide some helpful information. I'd like to apologize for not getting those comments ahead of time so you can see them, so I'm just going to go through it now quickly. Yeah, I guess start by saying I don't think there's anything wrong. What I reviewed in the planning study was the natural heritage work, so that's the hydrogeology work, and as it pertains to also the natural heritage function, the wetlands and terrestrial conditions. There's nothing wrong with the work. I think it stops short of being able to characterize the function of the groundwater and natural heritage system out there, and I'll talk a little bit about what we can do to maybe help that. So let me step back. The subject lands, I think, as most people know, is something called a highly vulnerable recharge area. So it's a very significant groundwater. It serves a very important groundwater function. It's very similar to the Oak Ridges moraine, right? High, so rain falls on it, lots of infiltration. That water flows through the groundwater system and discharges into the down gradient, downhill stream systems as groundwater discharge, recharge. So, yeah, and really the most important study on these lands from a groundwater perspective were back in 2005, and it noted that they're called the Font Hill Came Complex. Everybody knows Font Hill. Highly sensitive and susceptible to impacts of development, and that's simply because of their recharge function that they provide. It's not necessarily the features on those, but it's the features that down gradient, downstream that they support. So, sorry, I'm just going through my notes quick here. And these subjects land similarly. If you look at a map, I don't think we have it here, but you can see the Font Hill, and then around the edge of the hill, where the gradient changes, and where the sands start to meet the bedrock or underlying higher lower permeability sediments, you get groundwater discharge. And so the streams all sort of start at the same kind of level. That's why you see them south of Welland Road, sometimes near Foss Road. So infiltrates into the Came sediments and then comes out down gradient into the stream systems. So I think the thing is that the existing study didn't look at the function of those wetlands. Like normally you'd put in mini piezometers to look at gradients. So where's the water that's in the wetlands, particularly the one that's the large one that they're still doing some studies on? Where's the water coming from that's feeding that natural feature? And we would you'd look at measuring stream flows out of it. You'd look at putting in mini piezometers. You look at looking at the hydro period of the wetland. How's the wetland function? When's the water come in? When does it not? And so it's really absent a lot of that key data. And so the other issue is there wasn't a lot of attention to characterizing the systems that are actually south of the subject lands, where groundwater is potentially from the site is actually contributing to all the streams. And you can see that there's lots of wetland function down there. The Upper Quail Creek, provincially significant wetland, Font Hill Came, provincially significant wetland. So those all are south of the subject lands. So, I mean, similar studies in jurisdictions that we work on, they'll spend 3 years monitoring a wetland system like that to understand how it functions and how you can design stormwater management features to actually protect the function of those systems. The report does correctly state, I think, that shallow groundwater is contributing to the flow in the streams. And the one that they specifically mentioned was Cream Street, where the creek crosses through the subject lands, exits under Cream. And so for that, there was reported base flow data from a study 20 years ago that was around less than 1 to 5 liters a second stream flow. And so if you look at, let's assume it's 1.5 liters per second stream flow, to generate that base flow, which is the flow that happens when it doesn't rain, so it's just the groundwater component, is what we call base flow, you would need about 59 acres of land at the infiltration capacity that's reported in the report. So if you drive around and look at all of the groundwater dependent features, I had a drive today and I found about 4 of them along Welland Road. So maybe it's about 5 liters a second, it looks like. You would need 200 acres of land of groundwater recharge function to support that base flow, which is nearly the size of the subject lands. So I'm going to get on with it here. Yeah, so some things that can be done, I think, and some of these studies are outlined in the recent subwatershed planning guide from the Ministry of Natural Environment. 4 studies like this look at water budgets, look at long-term monitoring, water quality assessments, water quantity assessments, identification, protection of hydrologic features, et cetera, et cetera. So a bit more study would answer a lot of these questions. Because the problem we're going to have is as development comes, if we don't have the data to help the developer design systems to actually do this properly, we're going to be back where we started. So it's about getting this done right now so we can help developers do what they need to do when the time comes. So thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does conclude our pre-registered speakers, so you can open it up to the gallery.
Okay.
The microphone is on. You can keep it on when you make your comments, and please state your name for the record.
Okay, thank you. And I see we have the first presenter. Please approach the microphone, state your name, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Sorry, I also have laryngitis, so I'll do my best. My name is Lynn Shatford, and just for context, I live on Sunset Drive, which was on the map there. And I have been to, I'm pretty sure, all of the open houses that they've had right from the get-go. And my kids, 2 of whom are here tonight, were just little then. And they're big now, so... So I appreciate that you brought out that you're not really going to answer questions per now. So I'll just ask a couple questions that hopefully will be able to be addressed later. One of the questions that I had did also pertain to water. So we live about halfway on Sunset Drive between Memorial and Canberra. The groundwater flow sometimes is pretty intense. A few years ago, it flowed right into our basement. And so I guess I would like to know what provisions or what plans, what guardrails will be put in place so that any future development won't exacerbate that problem. I've never met the gentleman who just spoke, but I thought that was very helpful to the idea of taking a few years to study and see how all of this, the groundwater thing, works, so that it doesn't end up in my basement again. And another question that I had was, we are currently on town water, but we have a septic system. And so my question is, are we still going to be able to be on a septic system? And if that's going to change, like I imagine they'll need, like the new houses will, or the new development will want like servicing. I don't even know all the words, but anyway, I hope you guys know what I mean. But like, anyway, am I going to have to pay for that is what I want to know. Like, are we going to have to pay a lot of money to go off septic and to go on whatever the new things are? Because I would not like to do that. I think it would be good if you could give people a choice, or if we don't have a choice, then I would like for the developers to pay for that, because like I didn't ask to have to go onto the new servicing. And then the last point that I just wanted to make, and I'm sort of hoping I win the prize for being the shortest speaker tonight. The last point that I would like to make is I really appreciate the conversations about what kind of housing options that we are going to put in this development. So just for a little bit of context, we bought our house in 2000. And I was pregnant with our first, and now we have 4 kids. So my 2 oldest kids are going to be graduating post-secondary in the next year or 2. They have paid for their university degrees. They have healthy bank accounts. I would love for them to be able to save up and be able to actually buy a place in Fenwick. So not a really big, huge house, but like a starter home or something like that. You know, I think that would be great. And if in, you know, a few, like 20 years or whatever, I don't know, maybe we'll want to downsize or something. So I really appreciate the idea of mixed options and not just like really big, huge houses. I'm on the school councils for both the public school in Fenwick and for Crosley. And our numbers are growing, so we know that there's young families moving into the neighborhood. And these kids are going to grow up, and it would be great if they could still stay in Fenwick. So I appreciate the thought that Councillor Niznik had earlier with the other one about just kind of having a conversation. What can we do to accommodate a variety of life cycles? Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Yuta. I've talked to you a few times at the different presentations. I do appreciate your focus on trying to maintain the natural heritage of Fenwick. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Thank you for your presentation. I see back with a hand up. Come on. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go, Mr. Jeffs. Come on, come ahead. You were hiding behind some people.
I'm short, I disappeared.
Okay, so please state your name for those that don't know you, and you have the floor.
Okay, I'm Jim Jeffs. I live at 626 Foss Road. So, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff, fellow residents, I have a lot of concerns about what's happening here. I've had property on Foss Road for about 50 years. About 45 years ago, I planted 100 trees, some of them at the northeast corner, and that area floods. Floods now, it never used to, but now it floods all the time. I've lost a lot of trees. Put another 100 trees then at the back of the property. Doesn't flood now, but my concern is that it will. And over the past number of years, there have been times when the water's really backed up on Foss Road and the north side, and they put a new culvert in. But the culvert, I don't know the size, but then the water drains off my property, goes to the railway bed, which is a smaller culvert, which doesn't make too much sense to me. And then there's 3 new homes behind me, and same thing, small culvert. As a matter of fact, we attended a meeting of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority last week I mentioned that to him, and he said that he was aware of the problem with culvert size. I think it doesn't make sense. You have a big culvert and small culvert. I don't know if the town knows the size of culverts all the way down Quail Creek to where it ends, because if we're planning a subdivision like that, you should know, because otherwise there's going to be flooding everywhere. So basically, my concern is stormwater management. And I know evidently with 20 Mile Creek and East Font Hill, there was a plan that's supposed to work. Well, there's overflow. So when it comes to stormwater management, especially when I hear this other speaker talk, that, you know, there's a real issue here, that there's going to be more and more water, we'll lose more and more trees, and yet, you know, the thing to do as far as environment is plant more trees. But when you plant them, they drown because of, well, the problem with stormwater, then it's a real concern. So I'd just like you to keep those ideas in the back of your mind when you consider this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for your presentation. I'll just make a comment that when we talk about the railways, they are not very nice people to deal with when it comes to going under the railway bed. It's a task in itself. We'll just leave it at that for now. Any other speakers? Please come ahead, sir. Please state your name and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Council and Mayor. Good evening. My name is Tim Casson, 692 Camborough Road. I apologize. I'm not sure of the parliamentary procedures here, but I do have questions rather than a presentation. If this is the correct time to do that, I do not know.
I'll turn to the clerk. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. To our first presenter from the planning group, I just had a quick question regarding one of the pictures that she showed regarding the new plan, the new layout. Where are we at in that cycle of the planning? Is this what we're looking at now? Is this going to be reassessed, and we're looking at something down the road, it might change again? Or is this kind of where we're at for the time being?
Should I go to the Director of Planning, Ms. Green?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So this is, the public meeting to certainly get public feedback and comments. The development plan, or the kind of the land use structure plan, is where we're at today. There is the potential for some adjustments to it, but I think at this point in time, we'd just be talking about tweaks as opposed to a wholesale rework. We've been at this for a good number of years, and there's been lots of consultation, and we're in the home stretch, as we like to say. So we're not anticipating that there will be necessarily significant change.
Okay, thank you, because I did attend the 2017 meeting, and I did see the plans have changed since then, actually quite a bit, especially considered the green space. My question to that was, the green space that she showed in what would be now the northwest corner of the development, which is Balfour and Camborough, there is now more green space right behind my house, which we have woods behind our house, and that has been, of course, one of my wife's biggest concerns is the woods, of course. It now shows, would that be considered, if we're looking at the actual size of that, is that the existing woods as we see them now to that spacing, or what would be the actual range of that green space? Do we know?
Ms. Weems?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, that's the existing size of the woodland feature that exists on the ground there today.
As it exists now. Okay, thank you. If all goes to plan and everything's hunky-dory and everything works with all the plans and everything, shovels in the ground, what would we actually be looking at theoretically? I know we can't nail it down to a day and a time, but hypothetical.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, this is the first step. Once there's a secondary plan completed, and if it were to get approved, then that would allow for the ability for landowners to submit development applications to the town. So the timing on when we might receive development applications is not something that the town controls. It's up to the individual landowners and so forth. If they want to develop their lands, they will proceed with development applications when they're ready to. Now, we've had some I guess, preliminary discussions with some of the landowners kind of south of Canberra Road. And I would gather, and my sense would be that that would be the area that would be developed first versus the area north of Canberra Road in
I'm
terms
familiar
of
with some of those
timing.
gentlemen, so yes.
So, you know, the earliest, I think you're looking at something between 3 to 5 years before you're, you know, seeing houses being built.
And that would be, for housing being built, or the actual start of the infrastructure, the sewage, all that, and that kind of thing, just.
Yeah, so you could say maybe 3 years for infrastructure, 5 years for, you know, house construction.
Okay.
But that's very elastic.
Oh, no, I completely understand. I just want to know if it was going to be something much sooner. I want to know how fast I can get the for sale sign in the yard, and then so go from there. But, you know, hey, I'm not one of those not in your backyard people. It's just, we like our trees, so.
The trees are staying.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Anyone else? No? Go ahead, sir. State your name, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of council and everyone in attendance. Thanks for providing me an opportunity to speak. My name is William Heikoop. I'm the planning manager with Upper Canada Consultants. Tonight, I'm appearing on behalf of several of my clients who own lands within the East Fenwick Secondary Plan area, wish to express their support for this secondary plan coming forward. As developers, they have been owning this land for quite some time and have been anticipating the secondary plan process and are pleased to see it coming forward for consideration. The secondary plan in front of you this evening provides a well-balanced policy hierarchy that will permit development, but will do so in a manner that respects the existing Fenwick community while meeting the overall town objectives and policies within the official plan, including the protection of the sensitive environmental features. The secondary plan in front of you has taken a considerable amount of work and effort to get to this point. I'd like to thank Ute, Barb, and Lindsay for working with us on this process. Overall, even though it has been a long process, after much deliberation and ongoing discussions with staff, not only at the town, but environmental staff at the Niagara region and the MPCA, we look forward to seeing the necessary land use approvals being brought forward. Thank you for your time, and I'm certainly here for questions. Should council have any of myself or our development group, I want to provide that opportunity for you. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Anyone else wish to speak? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
My name is Richard Trent. I live on 660 Welland Road in Fenwick. That's that question. Why is part of my property in the red zone? That was my first question. And my water table, at one of the meetings, I asked the question, when they build across the road, will my water table be gone, my well? And more or less he said, because they were doing some survey, and he didn't have the result. So more or less he told me that my well would probably go dry. And do I have to hook up to the city water? Because right now I have the bacterial light, and I get my septic pump every 3 or 4 years, and it's a lot cheaper, and I get my water tested, and it's fine. So now my bill is going to be a lot higher, and are they going to pay for bringing it to the road, or is this going to be on me? Do I have to hook up to the city water when it comes in? My well is only 11 feet deep. I got about 4 feet of water in it, and it's fine unless I run it all day. So I got a feeling my well will go dry. And for the survey for how you call it, finding arrows and that, there's a abandoned well in front of my place in the field, and I see them do digging or survey all the way down. I had mentioned to one of them, there's an abandoned well right across from Welland Road, and when I bought the place 24 years ago, the lawyer said there's a public well somewhere around my property. So I'm assuming it's just across the road. And I mentioned if they go, take a look over there, that could be Indians or, natives, over there, but they were just all the way up the hill there. Okay. Well, that'll be enough. I got other questions, but that'll be enough. Thank you, the council and the mayor.
Okay, thank you. So Ms. Weens, this gentleman would be, I know town staff will meet with anyone, anywhere. He would, I suggest, sir, that, yeah, we could answer that question tonight, or you could come in and, what do you suggest, Ms. Weens? You're the expert here.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, we're happy to meet with this gentleman at any time. But with respect to his question about why his property was included in the secondary plan area,
yes.
So there are policies in the town's official plan that establish kind of the limits and the boundaries for the secondary plan area. These are areas that are in the urban boundary of Fenwick, and there's policies that indicate that prior to any future consideration for development that we have to do this secondary plan. So these areas have been in the urban boundary since 1982. So for over 40 years, it's been contemplated that this area would be a focus for development. But we have to go through this secondary plan process. So we're here now. And so the terms of reference for the study identified this area, and it's the area that's really not serviced with municipal water or sanitary. So that kind of formed the boundary or the limits of the secondary plan area. So the long term is that, yes, there will be services brought in and sanitary sewer, water put in along Welland Road. And ultimately, there will be a desire to be connected to those municipal services. Council has yet to make a decision about when that will happen or how that will happen. And so that's still something that there will be a further decision to be made for those existing residents. But yeah, and with respect to the well and the potential for the well going dry, certainly there's been quite a bit of background study done with respect to the groundwater. We've heard a lot about the groundwater conditions and how shallow the groundwater is here. So we do have a lot of that information. I can't say right now this evening whether or not there will be an impact on the groundwater or not, and on this gentleman's well. That will be something that will be evaluated and looked at when we have individual development applications. And so that is something that at this stage we don't have definitive answers for, and will be requiring some of those further analysis and further studies. But certainly we're happy to meet with anyone at any time. We're not looking to, for this gentleman, if he wants to develop or do something with his property, it would be at his desire and his time frame. The town is not the one that goes in and develops the property.
Okay.
So my property on the red line, it's only half. I got an acre and a half. So you're saying I could put a 4 or 5 house in the back there? if I get the okay. 27 foot wide?
Yeah.
One more question I forgot. For the sewer system, okay? At one of the last meeting, Pond Hill, Fenwick is at capacity. And the sewer line has to go all the way to Welland. Have you approached that or not?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, there are certainly improvements and upgrades that are being done to the existing infrastructure to improve the capacity. Certainly some of the work that was done this year on Church Street has that in mind. And next year, we're going to be expanding the sewer on Foss Road as well. But we do know that there are also some additional work that has to happen. Ute talked about a lift station that will be needed. So we have, at a high level, we know where those sanitary sewer improvements will need to happen. And, you know, at what phase and stage, at what point in the development do you do that? Those are things that we're working through now. But certainly there is, you know, there is some improvements that we've been doing and have been planned for, and there are future improvements that will come forward in future capital decisions and budgeting requirements that will have to be made.
Thank you. Sir?
Because at the previous meeting, they said the trunk line to the well and pollution plant, which I think it is a capacity. So even to be in like a church, you put all these new houses, it has to go all the way down to Welland. Basically, you know, you have to. That's going to cost a lot of money for the town of ours. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, thanks. But, and like, to answer your other questions, and to anybody here, the time I've been mayor, I do know that town staff is willing to meet with anyone, answering further questions. It's just not this meeting. So if you have other questions, either get a hold of me, get a hold of the clerk, and you're more than welcome to set up meetings to come into town hall and talk to town staff at any time. Just want to make that clear. Any other speakers? Please state your name and you have the floor.
Hi, Caitlin Zaworski. I'm a homeowner on Cambro that would be subject to these areas of development. And I'd like to state that I'm not anti-development. I understand that it's a necessary and a vital opportunity for every city, township, municipality. And a couple of my concerns have been touched upon, obviously being sewer, hydro, namely being someone that newly put in a newer septic system, and the potential to now have to rip that out, what the cost associated with that is, what the cost associated with having a sewer then put in and attached to our home, all of those concerns. Another subject that was up of concern of my husband and I's was hydro. Obviously, I've lived in Fenwick for 13 years now, and I personally experienced a number of outages in the last 2 to 3 years, more than I've ever experienced. My husband's lived in Fenwick his entire life, 42 years, and we are now considering the potential of having to put in a generator, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. So obviously with this large development, then therefore going behind us, what's that going to do to the grid? And the need for additional power and upgrades. And as we've touched upon, you know, electric vehicles, all homes are now required to put in 200 amp services in their garage. But if our grid cannot withstand it, what is this development going to do to all of the current and existing homeowners? And then furthermore, our school system. I'm a mom of 2 young children that both attend Wellington Heights. That school is already at capacity, even though it had a renovation only 3-4 years ago when Center Street was closed down and they opted to keep, you know, the old EWFR, now Wellington Heights. We are now already in a portable situation. So if you say on average, with 750 dwellings going in, 6 of those being apartment buildings that are anywhere from 4 to 6 stories high, say on average 1 student or 1 child per home, which is probably below average, where are we? That's doubling the capacity of Wellington Heights. So where are we putting these children? What are we doing to help? I've seen this issue in Fenton Hill with all of the development that has went in. Glen A. Green's at capacity. AK Wig is at capacity. Quaker Road, which is, you know, we know on Quaker Road and Rice, which is encompassing and taking in a lot of these students, is at capacity. They are in a 15 portable situation where there is no tarmac left. So these kids now have nowhere to play in the winter months. So we know that our developing area within Fonthill, Fenwick, and the surrounding areas are at capacity. So what is the plan? Have we went to the district school board? Have we went to other, you know, school boards to determine what we are going to do with all of these students and young children and young families that are more than likely the ones that are going to be moving into this development. And based on the studies that I've heard, we've done lots with respect to environmental, keeping wetlands and secured areas, environmental areas protected and in order. But I don't think we've looked at the main issue with respect to our school systems and how it's going to be impacted.
Okay, thank you. So I will go back to the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens. When we are contemplating, not particularly this subdivision, but growth, let's say East Font Hill, what have you, did we coordinate with the school board and whether we reach out to them or whether they reach out to us, and were they made aware of the growth that we were anticipating in wherever that subdivision was going to take?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. Certainly, the school board has been also circulated the draft of this secondary plan, and they've also been kept informed. They are certainly involved with discussions with the region in terms of where growth is happening across the region and the projections for growth. As well, when we have individual subdivision applications, those all get circulated to the school board so that they can do their planning and monitoring for growth and where that growth is occurring, and figure out the needs for their schools and their school system. So there is the requirement to certainly consult with the school boards as well throughout this process, but also when individual applications development applications come forward as well.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you. Good to know. Any other speakers? Please. Please state your name and you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Lauren Arnold. I'm a resident in Fenwick as well on Canberra Road. I just wanted to echo a lot of the concerns of Ms. Swarsky as well. I thought she was eloquent in how she addressed the issues and concerns as a parent of 3 young children as well, of the school system in that capacity. And also the hydro outages. That's been an issue for us, pretty consistently in the last few years. And having infant children in the dead of winter without heat, I mean, it's very concerning. And so that's something I just wanted to reiterate. I also just have some questions about the planning and the development plan as it exists. I've seen the plan, and from what I understand, I really do appreciate the green space and how it's been connected from the woodlot to the protected lands as well. There is that environmental corridor that runs along between the two. And then also the road that is projected to connect Welland Road to Memorial. A lot of those two specific elements that I've paid attention to because they run through private land, and as one of those owners, I'm interested in knowing kind of what that plan might look like if it had to be amended, because those property owners may not want to, have those things there. So specifically, I'm interested in learning more about the environmental corridor, understanding how that would be adjusted to accommodate a private landowner retaining their private land.
Ms. Weens?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So certainly the environmental corridor is shown as a linking feature between the woodland and the PSW. And if it were, in order to realize that would be realized through a development application. If there's no development application proposed on your property, then there can't be that environmental corridor on your property. So it is something that we typically plan for as we get development applications, and it may shift north or south depending on a proposal and where it can fit in. Certainly you can see how in East Font Hill, for example, we have an environmental corridor along a creek. We redirected and realigned that creek, and we put pedestrian pathway along it, and that was all done, as a development application came in and the developers do that and then the land comes to the town. So there is some flexibility as to where that is, but the notion is that that environmental corridor will connect the woodland to the wetland. And we will try to achieve that when we get development applications. But if you're not bringing forward any development on your land, then it won't be going through your land.
And will we be alerted to any changes in the plan? Will we have another opportunity to comment?
Yes.
When those changes are made?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly as development applications proceed, again, there's public consultation process through plans of subdivision and plan a zoning bylaw application processes. So that's typically where we nail down the details. And again, there's public meetings and public consultation process involved with that. And that's how, adjacent property owners and the neighbors would get involved in that process.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. We have another person approaching the microphone. Please state your name and you have the floor.
Through the mayor, it's Sherry Rushin, and thank you for your time. Just wanted to bring one thing up. I did send a letter in. Main concern is, of course, drainage. Drainage from the Cherry Ridge construction that took place back many moons ago did impact greatly area farmers, and we all are very concerned what this also may happen to many of us. Main thing is hydrology. Is there something that could be done possibly, such as we're building these subdivisions, and as this gentleman said here, there's issue with flow coming down from the Kame, sand versus, yes, parts of Fenwick are much sand. I'm dead ass clay. Sand, clay don't mix. Sorry, it's a fact of farming. Is there a way of building a natural water feature within your beautification area, within your natural habitat, that would help hold the function of what's happening with the water so this poor lady's basement does not get flooded, as well as planning ahead for what may happen, but make it a water feature that could be in the center, that would be beautiful and still help with drainage issues and not just be a nice pond that gets full of bulrushes. That's my point. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Questions? It does seem to be because of this way this piece of ground is, it seems to be a reoccurring thought that drainage is going to be, is indeed the concern of residents on the border of this development, and this council has heard it, and the staff has heard your concerns, and I can't help but think that maybe we'll have to study that even more going ahead, for sure. The Kame is a complicated geological feature. It isn't. You have to understand it, and we have to work with it. I agree with all the citizens here, for sure. Anyone else in the audience that wants to approach the microphone? Okay, I'll one more time. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see anyone. I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did actually receive 2 emails from the same person, Jasmine. I will read those into the record, and I have forwarded them to the planning department. What will the lift station do, and how large will the lift station be? How will it affect the land, water, wetland systems, and adjacent properties, especially being so close to the natural heritage system and environmentally protected areas? How will the properties that are proposed to have a trail system put on or through them be affected, and when will we be notified what properties will be put on? Can we appeal this? How will the properties along Canberra Road Promenade be affected with development of the road and cycling system? There is not a lot of space between the road and the ditches and some houses. How will the space be large enough to accommodate both the road, the ditches, and ensure the ditches are large enough to handle the water load, proposed sewage system, and houses that are close to the road? And again, I have forwarded this to the planning department.
Okay.
If council would like to ask any clarifying questions of the public, now would be the time to do so before you move to committee input.
Okay, thank you. So is there any questions from the council we're talking to the public input?
To the
then?
public before we close the public portion.
Okay, so any questions from council to any of the presenters in the audience? Okay, so I will take one of Lynn's questions, and I'll go to the Director of Planning. The people on Sunset, they live in big enough lots. Obviously, they're not infrastructure now. How would, again, looking into the crystal ball, do you see that changing for the houses that are already there, that they would be forced or to hook up to the infrastructure, or do you see their systems being relatively standalone then as they are now?
Mr. Mayor, through you, so with Sunset and Older, those are kind of two existing developments, and they're on septic systems. And so unless there is, a failure with septic systems or some orders placed on properties that they need to connect, and usually those would be Ministry of Environment orders, then, my sense is that, there wouldn't be the need at this point in time. In order to put services down there, that would be something that the town would do. It's not a developer. The town would
Yes.
install the services on those roads, and we would have to figure that out in a capital plan and then go forward. But I don't think we would be doing that unless we have a problem and their septic systems are failing in that area.
Yes. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Council Olson, so now we're asking questions of public presenters right now.
I'm going to ask a question,
Oh.
Ms. Ween.
Go ahead. Well,
Yeah, if council has no more questions for the public, we can go into the committee portion. I have confirmed that it is 7:59 PM. We've received no further emails, so if you're amenable, we can move into the committee portion.
okay, then indeed we will, and Council Olson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Weens. You mentioned that we have a number of studies, hydrological studies. Is there any way of consolidating them into one final summarized report so that we can see what else we have to do to get a handle on this, on the water situation?
To Ms. Weens?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, there were a number of studies that were done, hydrogeological and geotechnical studies through this process. Those studies have been reviewed by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, as well as the regional environmental staff as well. And so we have a sense that now we know what we need in terms of when there is a subdivision application, the further studies that they need to do to address those issues. So there will be, once we get development applications, there will be a requirement for them to do some further analysis. But at this point, we have enough information to know where is the kind of the right location for the septic, or not for the septic, where is the right location for the stormwater management system, where it should be located, and, general sizing requirements for it. But we haven't done the detailed engineering design. All of that comes later. All of those studies are still needed, but they will come with development applications. So at this point in time, it's premature to do those studies until we know what the development is actually going to be. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, but there are policies in the secondary plan that indicate that there are these further studies required. And so we do know now the limits of where we did enough work to know where we can put that storm pond and be fairly confident that that is the best location for the stormwater management facility.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another question, reading through the terms of reference, one of the problems that we have in the town is speeding. And I noticed that the roads we picked are straight lines. I guess that's just a conceptual drawing, is it? Because one way we can build in features that slow people down is curves in the road. So is that correct? That they're just conceptual?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, those are what we refer to as demonstration plans, and they are conceptual in terms of, the roads. Will the road have an angle or a curve into it? It could very well. And, where you put in intersections, you want to design them so that, people do come to the full stop. You do proper intersection design, and all of that will come once we have a detailed subdivision plan. But they are conceptual at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, and just before we continue, I want to remind all councilors that for the first time around, we'll limit each councilor to 2 questions and then move on to another councilor, and then we'll come back. Any other questions from council on the presentations? Councilor Kerr.
Yes, my only question is my hope for UTA in the future that all of the dwelling and parcels that are located on Canberra Road, on Memorial Drive, on Cream Street be delineated. Sunset Drive and Alder Estates are well marked out to identify where all the individual homes are. When you present a map that shows kind of blank slate, this is where development's going, but doesn't take into account the number of dwellings that exist. Having lived in this community, my family's been here for well over 130 years, so I'm a little more familiar with things than maybe a lot of people. In fact, where I live was the original Fenwick Post Office. That's where my house is built. So that's how far back it goes. But it would be really nice to have something like that to identify, I think, to allay some of the concerns of the residents of private lands. What are the private lands now? I recognize developers accumulate lands, but it would be nice on the drawings to see them in a little more detail. And to Mr. Casson and his comment about the woodlands behind him, I remember that when that was the Sturtzinger farm, and that was actually all farm for a long time. The Sturtzinger house was the gray house a couple of doors down from you. So I remember a lot about it, but that would be my suggestion to her for a presentation to help clarify, maybe for people to identify where are the private lands, because you can do that with the navigator for the region and plot everything. And it would be nice to have that to start with as an underlay. Thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor, I do see that Ute has put her hand up, perhaps to respond.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. That's a very helpful suggestion. And actually, through some of the inquiry that the town staff has received already, we updated the land use plan to clearly bring up, just in the computer software, the clear delineation of each property. So it's really easy to read where the different land uses land as it comes to property ownership. But once again, as Director Weens has stated, the secondary plan is kind of your strategy plan. It can still flex and move things around, but the principles are there. So, for example, the principle of having an environmental corridor connecting the woodlot to the wetland area, it's what carries. Now, if the environmental corridor needs to shift to avoid some of the different properties, that can happen. But the principle of having that joining stays the same way as the principle of connecting Cream to Welland, whether it's a combination of how the future grading of the new community works, maybe the design of how you maybe want to highlight going through a park or by a park can change the alignment, but the principle of actually connecting remains. So I wanted to just leave you with the notion that the secondary plan is almost like the instructions on how the future development will occur. It's not the absolutely final instructions and the layout of a house, so to speak, but it's just the instructions on how we will manage development as it comes in. And thank you for the suggestion. We will circulate that updated land use plan showing the exact property boundaries.
Councilor, thank you. Any other questions? I'll go to Councilor Nesnick.
Yes, thank you very much. So just noticing that overall, I have two questions. Am I allowed to?
You're allowed to. Go ahead.
Thank you. One through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Weens. So the roadway that goes north-south, it is a plan, as Uta said. So how are those road lands acquired in order to make that happen? Because I do think we would need a road going there, as well as the extension of Sunset Drive. So how are those lands acquired? Are they acquired through cooperation with residents? Are they acquired when the plans come into place? Are they expropriated as needed? Or how does that work?
Ms. Weens?
Mr. Mayor, through you, any number
All of
of
the
those. Yes, I mean, ideally, we certainly try to get those through development applications, which is the plans of subdivision. Sometimes we may need to purchase a connecting link off of a private property, and, when that happens, we enter into, negotiations and try to purchase it. And, the last resort would be expropriation. But certainly the easiest way to do it is through a development application process. And we tend to get the vast majority of, streets that way. And like I said, sometimes we do need to go out and get a connecting link if need be.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then my other question was, I noticed in the secondary plan that there is no designation or plans for commercial use along any of those existing corridors, Canberra Road and Welland Road. I know further west of Balfour there are some commercial properties, but as the community grows, if we're adding 750 new residents, it might be nice to have some commercial property either further west and consider they might want to be a grocery store there someday, or Tim Hortons, I'm not sure, something to that effect to meet the needs of those residents. I lived on Highway 20 for a long time. We were residential, and then it became a commercial property. So not that I'm advocating for commercial properties. I just think this is probably the time that if you're going to put in some commercial properties, or is it felt that there's enough sufficient to the west of this property? Because I like these homes, and I like the idea of this, that it is homes and it is residents and that sort of thing. So I think this will be a nice addition for the town of Pelham moving forward.
Thank you. To Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly, the need for commercial land was something that was taken into consideration. And we did, look at it very early on, and there was some discussions about that through the workshop with the community as well. In the end, everyone felt very strongly that we need to support the core area of Fenwick, and felt that if we put commercial land, any land uses in this area, it would take away or detract or compete with the commercial core of Fenwick, and that was really where the heart of the village is. And so the sense was that we should protect that commercial area and not create a situation that could diminish it. And just, the 750 housing units is going to garner population somewhere around 3,000 or 4,000 additional people. That's really not enough even for a convenience store.
I tried.
So yeah, the market studies will tell you need, like 10,000 people population for for, even the smallest type of convenience store. So, yeah, it's quite interesting.
That's true, we do have an app.
So in the end, the decision was that, we really didn't feel that there was a very strong need for additional commercial land in this area. That being said, if there was somebody that had a great, wonderful idea, that doesn't preclude them from ever coming in and applying for an amendment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, I'm going to jump the line, and I'm going to ask a question, if I may, with your indulgence. So my question is to the consultant who first spoke, and I want to talk, you kind of touched on the hash marks, and that is quite a suitable area. It's a sizable area, sorry. And so I'd like to know, it says, let me just pull it up here, special policy area. This designation recognizes natural heritage features that contribute to the natural heritage systems, but have not been defined through an environmental impact statement. So I guess my question to you is, when, in the scheme of things, will this be determined, and perhaps even more importantly, who will be taking place in the discussion to determine what stays in the NHS?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what will happen next, the schedules or the land use plans that you saw in my previous presentation really kind of flag areas that still need studies, and the hatch further confirms that. Now, the further study is leveraged through development applications, small or big. So the moment a property owner comes with an idea to develop a site, they will have to go through an entire process of conducting an environmental impact assessment study that can carry, as one of the residents already mentioned, a year or a cross-seasonal study of how the water flows and how the flora and fauna of that particular feature behaves. Once that study is commissioned and finalized, it has to go through not only the town staff review, but also goes through the NPCA review and obviously the regional review and their set of environmental engineers that make sure that the data collected and the delineation of that feature is the proper delineation. And what's interesting, as it happens with the lands between Canberra and Welland, is that through the development group doing their own due diligence and the studies that they are required to conduct, there was a significant change in the delineation of those features. Because if you recall, the previous plan didn't even really fully identify some of the wonderful woodlots located to the west. So it's through that extra layering that will come through development that we get the chance to ensure that the delineation is properly conducted, and there is a peer review at the 3 levels of government to make sure that that data and that resulting report is in accordance with the latest standards.
Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Back to council. This side, Council Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director, and can I jump the line now?
Yeah.
Thanks. Anyway, reading through the materials, there was an Appendix A, and on page 29 discusses transitional framework and a concurrent development application submitted in 2017 predates a number of legislative changes. What is the acreage of this application? Where is it located in the East Secondary Plan? And what type of housing forms are intended in this development?
To the director, Ms. Weens.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, these policies are actually talking about the transitional framework for the East Fenwick Secondary Plan as a whole. Because this secondary plan started in 2017. The region's official plan came into effect in 2022. And so the policies of this official plan is actually mirroring the policies of what was the old regional official plan in terms of, this is going to be complicated, in terms of the area that is, I guess, south of Canberra Road, because they did all that additional, the EIS studies. So the areas that UTE has identified in hatching that require further study, those will have to conform to the new policies in the regional official plan. So because this work started while the old policies were in effect, and those studies had started and initiated while the region's old studies were in effect, the region has those transitional policies that allow you to be approved under that set, and then going forward, anything new has to be approved under the new set.
So thank you for that. So reading the report, it said that there was a development application that will have the old rules set to it. Where is that development application in this plan?
That's the area south of Canberra Road, in between Canberra and Welland.
All of that area, or just is that the area along Balfour?
No, not all. No, it's the area. So we've already identified the woodlands and the PSW. All of those features have been identified, and those are going to remain. They still need to do some environmental study work around the stormwater management pond, and that will continue. But that's the area that is in that transitional area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor, anyone on this side? Not seeing any. Bob, Counselor Hildebrand, I can't believe that you have anything here.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Through the mayor, I'd like to address the concern that people had about the electrical infrastructure. The past council and this council have put in a great deal of effort with identifying the issues that people have had with outages, quality of power, low voltage, phase imbalance. As you know, we get our power from Niagara Falls. It flows to Barron Road, the transformer station. There's a transformer there that serves 4 of our transformers. Fenwick is served by the transformer that is west of E.L. Crosley High School on Highway 20. I hope many of you realize that that transformer station got upgraded this last summer, and since then I've not had any complaints about low voltage or phase imbalance. Phase imbalance affects those people that are using 600 volt 3-phase power, and that was significant. You know, if you were DeVries or any of the other manufacturing plants or any of those bigger power users, it was a serious issue. There's many businesses that spent big bucks putting in backup systems and having to run backup systems to have this problem. Many people were complaining about their sump pumps, TVs, and all kinds of stuff going out because of low voltage. Since that transformer station was updated this last summer, and that occurred because the past council and this council, many of us were addressing the Minister of Energy. The mayor was always there, Ontario Energy Board, our MP, Hydro One, and the independent electrical suppliers. The main transformer that we have on Barron Road, that I've been very active making sure that's still on the book to be replaced in 2026. That is critical for our power supply to Pelham. If we don't get that upgraded, it's been a problem because had fires there, they've had all kinds of problems there, and it needs to be changed. So this council has been very active in making sure that Fenwick has a proper power supply. And like I said, since this summer, conversion at that transformer station, I've not had one complaint about low voltage or power imbalance. The power imbalance is still a problem in Font Hill as well. Our Meridian Center, the ice rink that we have down there and the facility there, the way the technical people solve the problem there is they increase the tolerance that's allowable, which is not acceptable. But that's the only way we kept that thing running and keep the ice in during the summertime, because the power was out of phase that much, which is serious, which no matter how much we shout at Hydro One, they're a big organization. They keep saying, give us a call when it's occurring, but it never occurs when they're available. But this council has been very active, and we still will be very active, making sure that we have the quantity and the quality of power to the best of our ability. And it relies on a lot of political meetings and a lot of political push. And we're doing our very best to help you out. And I'm hoping that since this last summer, the outages have almost disappeared and the quality of your power is better. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I can just piggyback on that, I know that Ontario Hydro realizes that the infrastructure in Fenwick, it's been about 50 or 60, maybe even longer before that whole system has been upgraded. So and I was on some Zoom meeting, whether it be 6 months ago, whenever it was, and I don't know if it was me, Bob, or me or you, Bob, but we informed Hydro of this impending development that was going to be taking part in Fenwick, and we said, if you can't even service us now, what are you going to do when this hits the line in 4 to 5 years? So the person who was on the other end of that line, they were quite amazed that this was going to be taking place, and hopefully that got passed up the ladder, and Hydro now will give us a little more priority and do a complete rebuild, bringing the power into Fenwick, because it's been 50 or 60 years since that part of the grid has been upgraded. So we're aware of it here, and we're just trying to get Hydro One to be aware of it, because we are going to need more juice when we start building houses in that subdivision. There's no doubt about that. Go ahead, Councillor.
Let me just raise one other thing too. When you're buying new appliances and when you're buying new stuff, the new appliances are far more, if you want to call it fussy, their tolerance limit for power, they're very sensitive. So be very careful when you're buying new stuff to make sure that you got the proper power levels in your house and with your new equipment, because I've heard of some new stuff not working. And it's not because the equipment wasn't right, it's because your hydro supply is not in the tolerance. So it's a thing to be concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, okay, back to building houses. Any other questions? Councillor Nesnick?
Thank you. Mr. Councillor Eckert gave me his questions, so I'll speak for him. No, I just wanted one more question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Weens, with regards to back to the sewer and the septic. So if now you've mentioned the ones on Sunset, thank you very much, and over in Alder Crescent. Now I'm just thinking of the Canberra Road folks, who they're all on septic as well in that area, I believe. So when that road gets repurposed or refurbished or redesigned or updated or modernized, however we want to phrase it, I assume the sewer system, a sewer line would go in there, as well as a water. There's already water there, but updated sewer system. But at that point, will those residents be required to connect, or will they be able to be grandfathered use of their septic until the day comes when then they will need to reach out and connect to the sewer line under the road, probably at their expense, just going forward. Having lived that, I just want to make sure that folks are clear on what that expectation will be.
Ms. Weens, please.
Thank you. So we don't have a policy Town of Pelham does not have a policy with respect. The official plan states that where you have urban services, you're to connect to it. And typically in other municipalities, when services go in to an area, the town or the council municipality would pass a bylaw, and it would stipulate that the existing development is required to connect to those services within a specified time frame, so within 2 years or some time frame. They are responsible for the cost of that connection from the property line to their house. The town is responsible for anything in the roadway. So that's a future decision yet to be made, you know, by council, you know, whether you would require it, you give a specified time frame, or whether you don't require it. But typically, there is a bylaw that's passed, and there's a decision that's going to be made. And I'm sure you'll hear from lots of people, you know, that don't want to connect because their systems are working. But there's pros and cons for that, as you know, and so that's yet something that will have to come forward with to council, and a decision will have to be made.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Kerr.
As again, someone whose family farm became Cherry Ridge and that type of development, things that went on. As it exists right now, as information for people, there's water line all the way around. I have neighbors that have never connected to municipal water. They have a well. They continue to use their wells. They have never been forced to connect to the water line. Similarly, there are other people that have fully functioning septic systems and are not connecting to sewers because the lot size was designed and developed and fit all the health unit standards, so there really was not a requirement for them to connect. It's it's a little pet peeve of mine of if we force everybody to connect to something, then you mean you've just jacked up your demand or on the capacity of the system. But if you can have a whole pile of people that don't have to connect to it, you reduce the demands on the system as well. And I don't think more of us wanting to send more to a sewage treatment plant, if we really don't need to, is maybe not environmentally responsible when we think about it in the long run. If people remember why water came to Fenwick in the first place, it was because of blue babies. And anybody who knows anything about blue babies, that means there's nitrates in the water. And what happened was a lot of the wells within the village of Fenwick did not meet health standards. Right. So water was brought to Fenwick. That was probably the biggest thing that pushed that development along, was the fact that potable water was just a problem. Too many failing septic systems, contamination, et cetera. And it's right at an area of the transition where you move from sand to clay and the water comes up, and the hydrogeology fellow talked about it. That was our family farm. We're right at the transition of where we go from nice deep sand over to clay across the road type of thing. So those are things just from personal experience, I guess, to pass along to people. And I recognize and the people on Sunset and other places, that was, if they're adequately designed and meet health standards, I personally am not going to force somebody to do something that doesn't meet standards. But on the secondary side, and people brought up about electricity, I have a natural gas backup generator in my house. I put it in because as a kid, we lost power every winter for at least 2 to 3 days every year, and it was like given to the point. And so I said, my wife thought I was berserk when I told her we were putting in a backup generator, but ultimately it still works because we do have brownouts, we have reduced energy, as Councillor Hildebrand has stated. Severe storms go through, there's power outages. I have a neighbor who had a problem with a sump pump. Power went out, lots of water, sump pump doesn't work. What do you do? And I just said, for my own peace of mind, so we just have that. That was built into our plan of design from that. It's those kind of things that I think everybody's talking about. Water is the biggest issue, I think, that we're all talking about, as the mayor has brought up. Stormwater management, groundwater management. I am highly enthused at the amount of green space that's still within that area, taking into account all the properties. I can tell you about the Jake and Flossie Althouse and their farm on Canberra Road. As a kid, I went over to the Moors and was there. I was at the Sturtzingers that go all the way down to Welland Road. So I'm very familiar with an awful lot of the properties that are covered by this. And I was very concerned when I had first heard about the development that suddenly a lot of green space was going to get covered over, and there's a tremendous amount of green space left. I appreciate the director's comments of, you make things fit. A drawing is one thing, but how it comes to actual fruition depends on a lot of other moving parts and everybody being in agreement to make it happen. So I, as a landowner, certainly would not want people trekking across the back part of my property without my agreement to it. It's the type of thing. They have to acquire the lands and acquire the rights and all the other things that go with it. It's a matter of timing. East Fenwick has been on the books, as you said, for 40 years. It's been there. Fenwick will grow. Fenwick will not stay the hamlet that it was. When I grew up, there were 600 people in Fenwick when I was a kid. That was the highlight of the time, when they changed the road sign to say, oh, we got 25 more people. That was a banner day on the road signs. So it's coming, and it's not always easy to entertain, especially if you've been around a long time. We had a dug well. Well, I know the familiarity of having a dug well, except we had 5 kids in the house at the time, 1 bathroom growing up. A dug well with 3 feet of water. Let's just say bath time didn't have a lot of extra available at that point, and you learned how to use a toilet really efficiently. So these are the kind of things I think that everybody's bringing to the table. We're all aware of it. We understand your concerns. We recognize, and water management is a huge issue. And I think I hope for the residents that they don't walk away thinking we're forgetting about that. I think it's at the core of a lot of us thinking about where things are coming from. We recognize roads will have to be upgraded. There is no question. Memorial Drive is not designed for high volume traffic. But if people take into account and go back, if you're looking at where your front lot line is, go to the middle of the road, measure 33 feet from the center of that road, as best as it can be. That's the actual lot line of the road allowance. So what you think is you own up to that ditch. You don't own up to that ditch. That ditch is municipal property. And if you tell people in the village of Font Hill, where's your lot line, go look for where your water shutoff is. And that pretty much demarcates how far your yard goes. So it's following along. It's close to me because I've lived there so long. I'm familiar with it for so long. I think that we are going to do the best interests of the community as a whole, recognizing it has to be balanced. Councillor Nuznik's comments, I think, I would love to see houses built that I can move out of my house and still live in Fenwick. I can downsize into something more reasonable, because it just doesn't exist in Fenwick right now. I can't find a place to live in that's small. It's coming. And we still have development coming into Fenwick. The old Sutherland Farm, which has never been developed, by Cherry Ridge over to Canberra Road, is still another block of land. At some time, it's going to come to the forefront as well. So there's going to be more housing and more development. And the query about the schools, I think the District School Board of Niagara goes through all their planning about schools, and they're the ones in charge of it. The dilemma is we have flushes of a lot of kids and then no kids. And that's how schools get built, and then schools get closed, because it's this ebb and flow. It's really hard to predict. Ask the people in Smithville when they lost their high school. It suddenly got closed because the enrollment was there, and then the enrollment dropped right off, even though there's a ton of houses in there, because kids remember, there's a Catholic system as well as private schools where people are going, where kids are going. So they're not all going to EW FAR, and I will always call it EW FAR. I'm sorry, but I have a bone to pick with the SBN again. That's just my place. So those are the things I think that we're all aware of, and I appreciate the efforts of the planners. I appreciate the director's comments about this is the ballpark guideline of where we're going. It's not hard and fast where these roads are going to be and where things are. That's nice to know, that as the development comes in, there's always opportunities. I mean, look at the changes we did with the previous planning session. Suddenly the road has changed to make Norgate Drive contiguous. that wasn't there originally, but now it is. So those are, hopefully we get win-wins out of a lot of this stuff. And with that, I will stop so everybody can go home.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, any other questions, comments? Not seeing any, I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert that committee receive report 2024-0043, Planning Information Report, East Fenwick Secondary Plan for Information, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on East Fenwick Secondary Plan for Council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments on any of the presentations? Not seeing any. All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik that committee receive the consultant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda, and that committee receive the verbal presentations made by the public, and that committee receive the email correspondence to the clerks@pelham.ca email address. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion on any of the presentations? Not seeing any. All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt that the special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.